for coming back again. I hope you had a nice resting evening. And then today is going to be another exciting day. I hope we can have a lot of discussion. And at the last night, I was thinking after yesterday's workshop, I would like to really everybody to think about what are the things that we can do to move forward. You know, we're not asking you to make anything commitment. We have enough busy days, but at the same time, if there's a little whisper about what about this, that might, people listen to that kind of a little whispers, and then people just, kind of feel, oh, that's a good idea, and that's how we can kind of start the, more conversation. So I hope, please kind of think about it. Any moment, and then let us know, and then we'll ask you before lunch. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Yesterday, we got a lot of compliment from all the audiences that what they said, that quote unquote, that we don't get this kind of platform to meet people from all stakeholders, all levels, unquote. So that was the greatest, that all academics or all government people, all First Nation communities, we have those kind of workshops. But in a platform or workshop where we have university professors, students, our First Nation communities, then multi-level government, federal government, provincial government, city government, and other municipalities. So it's not a great group. We had about 40 people yesterday, but it was a great platform to hear from everyone. So yesterday we took a lot at home, in our head, and thank you very much for your contributions yesterday. Today we have more exciting day because we'll be hearing more from the First Nation communities as well as from other stakeholders. So it'll be quite an exciting day. And it's my pleasure to introduce our colleague, Colin Charles. She's from Lac La Ronge Indian Band in Saskatchewan. She's a professor at Northland College. She's the director of Indigenous Initiative or Indigenous Program in that college. So she has several hats on her head, and she'll be talking on their communities and their personal lived experience of wildfire in that community and the lessons learned. So I invite Colin Charles to make her talk. So what to you?
Thank you so much for coming and offering that good time for your gratitude for what you have to say. Thank you very much.
And then it's just those.
What's this?
These two?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So hello, I'm Colleen Charles. I'm, as you say, Lac La Ronge Indian Band. I'm Woodland Cree. I'm the TH dialect, and I was born and raised in La Ronge. And then so we're going to, I'm going to do, I guess, most of the talking, and Rajan's going to jump in a little bit later. And we're going to be talking about Indigenous disaster, perspectives on disaster. So we're going to be learning experience from wildlife evacuation in northern Saskatchewan. In 2015, we were evacuated from La Ronge. So just and a little bit more. So I was born and raised in La Ronge. I lived on the reserve for a while. My mother is Cree and Dene. My dad is Cree and part Scottish. And they both are both fluent Cree speakers. They went to residential schools. I went to residential school as well, and I only speak a little bit of my language because my mother at the time, when they went to residential school, they were strapped, they were beaten to when they said their language and spoken their language. So she didn't want this to happen to myself and my two younger brothers. So that's why I don't speak the Cree language, which is unfortunate. My father has a trap line, and then I have my own trap line, and I also have a timber wolf puppy. Well, he's half timber wolf and half husky, and he's like 3 years old, but he's really really big and really scary looking. So. So Lac La Ronge Indian Band, it's located in north central Saskatchewan on Treaty 6 territory. It's the largest First Nation band in Saskatchewan and one of the largest of 10. And it's in Canada. It's a population of over 11,000 members. And we always have a kind of a competition with Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation because they're the other one of the largest bands across Saskatchewan. So when those two chiefs get together, they're just like, and they're women chiefs too. Yeah. So I have my chief is Chief Tammy Cook-Searson, and the Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation is Chief Karen Bird. So La Ronge Band has 6 communities. So Little Red River, which is just north of Prince Albert, so half an hour from Prince Albert. Then there's Hall Lake, an hour away from La Ronge. Sucker River is half an hour north of La Ronge. Stanley Mission is an hour, and Grandmother's Bay is also an hour. So all those communities make up Lac La Ronge Indian Band. And of course La Ronge, and that's where I stay. So in 2015, so nearly 13,000 people were evacuated from the tri-community of La Ronge. So La Ronge, Air Ronge, and Lac La Ronge Indian Band are actually all situated by La Ronge Lake. So they're right beside each other. If you ever go to La Ronge, you're going into the reserve first, then Air Ronge, then the reserve, and then the town of La Ronge. Yeah. So it's a great place, living by the lake and go fishing every summer. So, but I missed go out on fishing this summer. When we were evacuated, they were shipped out on buses to the urban centers, Prince Albert, Saskatoon, Coal Lake, Alberta. I'm not sure why they were sent there. And then some stayed with family, friends, and backyards and in tents. I actually stayed 2 places with 2 different friends and family for a week at a time. And then my daughter and I, my youngest daughter, Jewel, and I left probably 2 days prior to the evacuation. And when everybody was getting evacuated, because she had a little hamster at the time, and then she was worried about all her belongings, and she made me. We went back to La Ronge, and we couldn't go on Highway 2, which was the main road. So we went all the way around. Smeaton area came up, and of course there was a car sitting there, and he let us go in. But we went this far going into La Ronge, but there's a certain place you can't go, and so we couldn't go to our house and check things out. We came back. The gas stations were open, one of them. So we came back down Highway 2, the main highway, and it's just smoky. That forest fire not only evacuated La Ronge and came close to La Ronge, but the forest fires at the time were crossing the road by Weaquin. It was all the way down. It was smoke all over, fires. It was really smoky. So this is right close to La Ronge, in the industrial area. And then these are some of the evacuees in Regina. And when we talk about evacuees, organizations such as Red Cross help volunteers, and And just in regards to, I just want to go back here to the Red Cross. When we talk about evacuees in the urban centers, and some of them were put into the gyms, like SAS Polytechnic and the SciS Woodland campus. And one of the, in kudos to Red Cross and volunteers. And I remember one of the ladies said yesterday about systemic racism. These volunteers, I don't think they know a whole lot of the indigenous history, and it shows towards the evacuees. We had a pregnant woman, she was 8 months pregnant, and she was sleeping on a cot in the gym. And it's like, how come, why didn't you put her in a hotel, or and get people to help her? And so just the little stuff like that. And apparently in Cold Lake, Alberta, there was a lot of misunderstandings, or like there's not a lot of help for my people when they went there. So like I say, Red Cross, it's good to have the volunteers, but they don't, if they knew more about our history, about indigenous history, be more compassionate to the evacuees that are there. And then so L'Orange Band, they have an emergency management coordinator, Maurice Ratt, and he's based out of Sucker River. And what he does now is he does updates. When the 2015 fire happened, my chief was in L'Orange for the whole time. She was on the phone. She was always doing updates to the community, calling around. And one of the things about when they got evacuated is that they evacuated everybody. And then, of course, Lac La Ronge Band has their own trained wildfire firefighters, but they shipped everybody out. The next day, they made a call out. Is there anybody who has level 1 firefighting? They could come back to the community? It's like, you should have asked that day before getting evacuated and on that bus, right? So a lot of my people, Lac La Ronge band members, missed out on fighting that fire. And so now after that situation, the L'Orange Band has this emergency coordinator. And now they're being more prepared for wildfires. So they do the backburn, as what we were talking about yesterday. And they did a backburn with the L'Orange Fire Department that were fighting the fires in 2015. And I didn't put this up there, but the reason why I'm interested in wildfires and firefighting is because I was actually a volunteer firefighter for 4 years in L'Orange. And it was great. It was a great experience. And then my oldest daughter became a firefighter when she turned 18 for a year. So we're both the mother-daughter firefighting team in Saskatchewan, probably across Canada at the time. So it was great. And then there's a story that we all wore those pagers at the time. So we got the call. We went to the fire hall. We all jumped in the truck going to a brush fire. We looked around, and it was just all women in that fire truck. Yeah. So there's probably about, out of all the firefighters, about 30, I think, and there was at least 10 women at the time. So it was interesting. Yeah. So of course they did EM coordinator does updates for the community, Facebook, where the fires are. In terms of evacuation, now they have staff who are Cree speakers that will provide support when evacuated. But because they have more prepared sprinkler systems, scrubbers, they have places to go for smoke inhaling smoke, the elders and the children, so they can go to stay in the community as opposed to being evacuated. So within that the last year, this past fire season, or they only evacuated one community of Hull Lake, and it was only for about 3 or 4 days that they went down south. Yeah, so it was good. And then somebody was talking about firefighting training yesterday. So we do more ongoing firefighting training for our band members. So my research interest, northern wildfire social implications on indigenous evacuees and processes. So indigenous methodologies, narrative inquiry, conversational method, storytelling, following indigenous protocol and methodologies, visiting, sharing, talking circles, interviews. The Western methodologies, I'm an anti-racism facilitator. So anti-racism education in regards to agencies, businesses, senior administration, the middleman, I put grassroots. And I've been doing this workshop called Colonialism on Canvas. And it's a brief look at the historical and contemporary issues of Indigenous peoples. And I've been doing this for, and it's through art, for educators, for students, for the past 5 years. And it's been great. My youngest daughter, Jewel, she actually, I asked her, a friend of mine did this, adapted my workshop for Two Spirit. I said, yeah, go ahead, use it. And she adapted it. And then she was at a conference. She came back to me and she said, these young people came to me and asked anything for youth. And she said, no, but I'll find out. So she come back to me, asked me about it. I said, okay, well, I'll ask my youngest daughter, Joe. And she was like 15 at the time. And I said, Joe, can you take this PowerPoint? Can you make it in a way so that young people understand? And she did. She did. And she's been doing that PowerPoint presentation. Hers is called Colonialism on Canvas, a Youth Perspective. And she did that for Canadian Youth Exchange at the University of Saskatchewan for youth gathering, youth conferences for my band in Larange, different areas. So it's well received. This is a picture. She's an artist, and this is a picture in charcoal. So when you do drive up to Larange, you can see something like this, where there's burnt trees all around. And reflective learnings. And here's to talk more about reflective learnings.
Okay, let me introduce Dr. Ranjan Datta. He's a Canadian Research Chair at Royal Mount University in Alberta. And he has done his PhD at the University of Saskatchewan. And then he moved to Calgary. And he has immense international as well as Canadian experience dealing with community-based disasters. He published extensively. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ranjan Datta.
So thank you so much for the introduction, and thanks, Colin. Actually, this research is one part of this our collective funding that we are also part of this conference. And this was not only for me. Colin actually was leading, and I was the learner. And I would like to acknowledge Jody is also here, and Vanessa. They are also part of this part of collective process. So we went this summer to the community to understand what does the disaster mean from the community perspective, and how we should learn in a way that community can use, as yesterday I was talking. So this is, you can see, this is Colin's father, and also this is Colin's stepmom, who is very knowledgeable medicine person, and Colin's father was very knowledgeable. Is it Colin, your father? Yeah. So we had opportunity to go to the cultural camp, learn from the community, from various elder and knowledge keepers. So as you can see, this is another way we went to the knowledge keeper in the community and also in the collective gathering in circle. So community shared, what is the meaning of disaster? And all of the community elder and knowledge keeper, they say, you cannot understand disaster without understanding impact of residential school. So residential school should be in the center. If you skip it and you just ask the question about disaster or any climate change, you are doing wrong, because you are not pointing what happened historically, how is damaged the all sustainability. So what residential school did collectively, they said is separated from the land and land-based practice by forceful. So that you have to understand, people, what you are seeing now is only impact. The road cost was separating from the land and land-based practice. And land-based cultivation, that has been sustainable. And her mom was collecting medicine plant every day from the surrounding. So what is the development is going on? They are cutting the all natural forest, or because of the electric wire, and also when burned out, when traditional burning is disturbed, when forest happen, all medicinal plant gone. And it's also created nowadays, as you can see, what happened last year in James Smith Cree First Nation communities. What we have seen, people are get scared their own people because it's created. The young generation, don't see the hope, the education they are getting, colonial education. They see how their ancestor or the family member and also the community people, it's created lots of mental trauma, lots of ongoing, invisible cultural genocide. That's why this gang culture is one of the significant disaster to understanding the other forms of disaster. And it was created lots of hopes. And when we are talking about disaster, it's also need to understand how the colonial food is introduced in a way, taking out the traditional food. That's why in the one of the, as you can see, this is the another elder was explaining. One of the elders, they say, not only talking about how disaster has been created and human may be disaster, since they have been living a residential school survivor, they're the best teacher who can teach all of us how to create collaborative ways of solving the problem. But that should be in the center, because residential school survivor, they have experience on disaster, they have experienced all the challenges, and they know how to teach the young generation. So calling father, mom, and everyone focused on, we need to bring residential school survivor in the center so that they can teach all of us. So one of the residential school survivor, they say, we learn from everything, and insect, leaves, plant, animal, fishes. They can teach us and protect us from many disasters. Many of our traditional plant and animals survive around -50 and -40, -40 and -50 and +40. They can teach how to protect ourselves. We have to be respectful and grateful on everything. And they say, as you can see, children were learning how to process the fish. Processing fish is knowing the story, where my food is coming, how fish is sacrificing for us. So understanding the whole story, not only going to the store and buy food and don't know the story. So that's the colonial process of food. Many people go to the store and buy food and don't care, wasting. But once the traditional ways of processing food, they go to the lake and catch fish, knowing where fish is coming, and all the process is so important. That's why the community elders. Oh, I'm going back. That's why community elder and knowledge keeper basis our year for creating disaster adaptation and resiliency. They need to learn how to hunt. They need to learn how to cultivate, respect, and how to create own food, how to be grateful, how to learn traditional story. stories from all of the elder knowledge keepers. So these are so important perspective. And one of the comments, one of the elders say, the longer you keep your children on the land, the more they can learn the land-based culture. And it creates adaptive or resiliency. It creates self-determination and self-empowerment. That's what the community needs. That's what we all need to work on this. We need to advocate for the land-based education because land-based education is the center of building resiliency within the community.
So, as I said, my daughter Jewel Charles, this is a self-portrait, and she did this in 2019, and it was a reflection of the wildfires, and it's a part of who I am, and I still have the original copy of this. And he was talking about land-based education. My dad has a trap line, and he works for the Lac Indian Band, and they utilize his trap line for cultural camps throughout the year, every year, and they take the students from the reserve bands, all age groups, into these culture camps. And so with my project with Rajan and Ed and a few people here, we're going to have a cultural camp at my dad's strapline starting in the spring. And then we'll invite they have a NITAP program on a reserve. And so invite those post-secondary students to our cultural camp. So definitely it's, returning to the teachings, and it's very important for the young people to learn their culture.
Thank you.
Tiniki, thank you.
So you have time for questions and some comments, your reflections. Please feel free. Okay, so I don't see any, so, okay, thank you very, very much indeed. Okay, 1 minute, okay. Should be to you as next, thank you very much. So we'll now move into the next panel, and it's over to Professor Burgess.
Thank you, Doug. May I invite our panelists, please come up? We have a large panel, so we're going to spill over a little bit. There are 6 of us. And, I'm very pleased to be here again with our panel. We have our panel has a representation from one of the.
No. You need the chair.
We're going to do the later. And then
I'd like to thank you, not for you, but I think for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So I'll introduce the panelists. Cliff Perkins is from.
Sorry, Cliff, but I'd like to offer you a tobacco pouch on sharing your knowledge. I appreciate it. Thank you.
From Fisher River Cree Nation is the Lands Governance Director at Fisher River. Fisher River, many of you will know, it's sort of halfway up Lake Winnipeg.
Luigi?
We also have Delaney Mason from Fisher. He's a counselor, and he's kindly agreed to be part of the panel. Colleen, of course, you just met, she's part of the panel, and will bring some of the Saskatchewan experience. She's at Black Lion Engineering Band and teaches at Northlands College. We have Devunesa Chapola, who's a postdoctoral fellow, a short postdoctoral fellow at the University of Regina. And she brings some experience from Alberta. But she's also mentioned that she's going to bring some of women's knowledge and practice into the panel. And last but not least, we have Gilbert Fredette from Norway House First Nation Creation, and he's a counselor, but I understand he does just about everything.
Everything but co-comments.
Now, we're going to run this panel a little bit differently from the panels yesterday. We're not going to have individual talks, but rather run it like a round table, and I'm using the headings from our program. I'm going to ask them to comment on indigenous knowledge and practice in their area, the ones that they're familiar with, related to hazards and climate change related problems and management. And then after a round of comments on that, I'm going to ask about some of the lessons learned and suggestions that they may have in terms of improving the way that hazards are being handled. And then finally, we're going to talk about building bridges between kinds of knowledge, which I think is going to be rather interesting. So, and actually, I'm going to talk as well. I'm not going to try to summarize or synthesize the panel, but I'm going to make some comments. That link and Ranjan and then the panel students. And we hope to do all of that before the cut break at 11:15. So
I don't know.
so we start with the question of please tell us about some of the practices and knowledge in your areas relevant to hazard management. Would you like to jump in?
If you think that how do you manage different disasters like floods?
I'm just trying to think of where to start here. Yeah, so, well, we in Fisher River, we experience a lot of climate. I got some notes here. Some climate change is affecting our creation in a number of ways. Flooding is the most destructive currently right now. Due to climate change, we're experiencing flooding a lot more severe, but also a lot more frequent. The flood events are happening now on average 5 years apart now, and a 1 in 100 year event is happening now closer to 1 every 15 to 20 years. So we need to be more prepared. We're forced to be more prepared. We need to keep our eye on the snow levels, and of course now with climate change, I think what's affecting our community is the speed that the water is melting, I guess. It seems like the snow, of course, it accumulates all winter. It hangs around longer into the spring, and then the heat hits. Last year, 2022, it was explained to me as a perfect storm. We don't believe in perfect storms. We knew it was going to flood. We watched the snow levels. We knew that the snow was still there late into the spring. And then when the 3 Colorado lows hit, followed by the rain, we were still frozen under the snow. So we were flooding as the snow melted. We were flooding as the overland flow came from the 3,000 kilometer basin that the Fisher River has in itself. And then once the snow melted and we were done flooding from the river and the overland flow, now we flood from the lakeside because the lake levels are being risen more and more every year. lot more windstorms or more. So a northwest wind increases our lake levels now from whatever full supply level to full supply level plus 4 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet in some spots. So in Fisher River in 2022, we experienced 2 flood events. In May, we flooded from the east and the north from the river and the overland flood. In June, we flooded from the high. Once all the snow was gone, we flooded from the lakeside. And so now both sides of our reserve have been flooded on 2 different events. We've been flooding now for 3 weeks straight. We were cut off of the road. Highway 224 in Peguis was unpassable for most vehicles. We had some higher trucks that made it through. The thing that saved us getting food was the Fish Road. It's a trail that we were kept ourselves with our own material, our own equipment, and we were able to get food into our community. We really didn't want to evacuate anybody. Evacuation is very hard on our people. We want to stay home. We want to look after our homes. We want to keep the basements dry. We don't want our elders to have to be under stress and travel. But there was some cases where we had to get our elders, our sick, our kids out, the diabetics, those that with severe health risks, and also those that homes were just uninhabitable. The basements are completely flooded in some homes. The water overflows the Tiger Dam, so now we don't have any way to allow these people to live in their homes. So we have to move them out to the city, into the city. Another I don't know how to explain this. It was another bad scenario was we of course, when we're left without any access in and out of our community, now we have to airlift. STARS helicopter has to come into our community and take out those that are become ill or hurt themselves. So we had that happen probably 24 times. So we have to run out. We have to go. I had my equipment. I'd pinpoint and give them the exact coordinates. I'll be able to talk to the pilots so they'll come down and land in the correct spots, be day or night. If we had even if we had a ambulance in the community, we could have got them to a helicopter landing area. We didn't have that then. So that's a lesson learned. Sorry.
One comment that struck me is that events are coming more frequently than
more
predicted.
Frequently and
So
also
it's,
more severe.
1 in 50-year flood is not coming once every 50 years. It's coming a lot more frequently.
A lot more frequently.
Is there a similar experience elsewhere? Let's move to the north end of Lake Winnipeg.
Good morning, everybody. Before we begin, I just wanted to thank all the great presenters yesterday. I'd like to thank you, Brandon, and especially volunteers and these graduate students that are behind the scenes making this all happen. I think we owe them a round of applause. Speaking as a former graduate student, I was behind the scenes getting that. So we got to make sure we always, it's a whole collaborative effort. So back to the question, and thanks for your, comments there. Fisher River as Norway House Cree Nation, Cross Lake and Fisher River were all one at one time. So we're talking about 30,000 members pretty well with these 3 communities combined. Fisher River left Norway House quite a few decades ago. With the promise of being agriculturalists and farmers, and they're still waiting for their first tractor, but that's okay, it's coming, the government said, after 80 years. But all due respect for the topic, Norway House Cree Nation, and we're situated right on the tip of Lake Winnipeg, as my colleague James Dixon spoke to, alluded to yesterday. We now have 2 absolute disaster projects from Manitoba Hydro. I call it the 2-mile and 8-mile channels. 2-mile that was dredged right out of our island, and then an 8-mile passage. Like I spoke to yesterday on some of the commentary, it's like pulling the plug out of a bathtub now. All that water and garbage that are coming from the south and from the city of Winnipeg all comes right into our community. And we did have pristine waters at one time. We can see the bottom of the lake and the fish, and now can't see anything. It's pieces of metal floating around everywhere. The kids are getting severe rashes. We have a water treatment plant, but if we don't have to use the water and boil it if we're on the lake. When the wind comes, we had the highest level of water in our community last year, and it was just about at our highway. So, and it took out the docks and everything else like that in the wintertime. Now with the Lake Winnipeg, Lake St. Martin diversion that's coming in the future, that's 2 8-mile dredging channels that are going to be flowing water back into Lake Winnipeg again. We can't afford even one more cup of water in our area because we're going to start losing our land. And we're going to start losing a lot more of our resources, natural resources, our future of what we do as Indigenous people. So a lot of this stuff is really detrimental to who we were and who we are and where we're going in the future as well. And just to make a comment, somebody mentioned about residential schools earlier. It's very important to understand the history of colonization. Most of us do, but the reserve system right across Canada today were undesirable tracts of land that no settlers ever wanted. Put them there, get them out of the way, so we can build this nation of Canada what it is today. So we're situated in tracts of land that basically couldn't grow. We were agriculturalists, couldn't do our farming anymore. We were basically put in these locations just to rot. But anyways, so that has a lot to do with it. So in modern day, Canadians live in beautiful southern areas, which are susceptible to flooding. But in the northern communities, isolation, change of diet, it flipped 180 for us. We used to live off the land with wild rice, fresh fish, moose meat, all of this beautiful food that kept us very healthy. And now, and this has to do with everything that's happening in the watershed, and now we are more dependable on northern stores, processed foods, which creates diabetes, amputations, cancers, all these asthma, mold conditions. All of these things are so detrimental to our young people now that we're struggling to find out from a transition from our old elders' way of life to the new generation and how we move forward. So a lot of this stuff has to be put into context at the beginning of colonization and where we're going now. But like I said yesterday, I'm not here to point fingers. I'm not here to lay blame. We can't change what happened. It's a bad, sad history, but we can change tomorrow. And that's what we're doing today in this great venue with people from all aspects of life, from all different parts of the world, from academia right to the provincial partnerships, to Indigenous knowledge from different parts of Turtle Island, which is Canada. So yeah, that's in a nutshell, that's some of the stuff.
Yeah, that's really great. I guess one important point that comes out of your intervention is that we're not just dealing with climate change. We're not just dealing with climate change hazards. There's a whole constellation of things that includes hydro's development of this area. 2 days ago, Gilbert showed me quite a few slides of junk, wires, buried barrels, which are still leaking, which Manitoba Hydro denies knowledge of, I guess. Because if they admitted responsibility, they would have to come and dig them all out, which is a big job. So,
if I could just comment on that a little bit. So these absolutely huge projects in the 70s, dredging 2 Mile Channel, was contracted to a BC company who had basically no knowledge of what they were doing. So when they were finished at that time, a lot of barrels, diesel was spilled, barrels were thrown into the water. You can see on my slides some of the stuff that we've still continued 5 decades after this project, but we're still finding buried in some of those islands. Hydro said you can't go more than 3 feet, it's not good. And we knew why, because they're hiding stuff. And we're finding stuff 15 feet. Motors, like I said, and the most dangerous ones are the barrels with the contaminants that are in there that are leaking into the water still. So, like I said, and they denied, everything is cleaned up, and we signed off on it. just be forthcoming. It's very important that we get this job done in a good way, but it's our children that are suffering, like this is just a catastrophe.
Yeah, so it's a
Yeah.
complicated problem. We're dealing with a bunch of interrelated things, colonialism. I was in a meeting in Alaska, and one of the elders said the single biggest damage that the white colonialism did to us is that it denied us making our own decisions. It denied us our empowerment, and in addition to everything else. So we're talking about an issue which has deep roots. So I'm sure perhaps some other panelists would like to jump in at this point.
Yeah, it's like Clifford and colleague to the preacher mentioned that a lot of like the outlet channel that's going to be constructed from Lake Manitoba, Lake St. Martin. We talked about invasive species yesterday. So like when a boat goes from Lake St. Martin to the Narrows, they have to get their boat inspected for zebra mussels or whatever it may be attached to it. So open up these two other lakes to Lake Winnipeg. Are they going to be inspecting the water that goes through for invasive species, or are they just going to flood Lake Winnipeg with everything? When we addressed zebra mussels and carp to the MTI representatives, they said, "Oh, your lake already has zebra mussels and carp anyway." Well, so those are the kind of answers that we have to put up with. There's no solutions. There's no reports done on like the amount of carp that we have in our lake, but they want to flood it with more. We had 3 whitefish spawning grounds. We have 1 left. The channels that the 8 mile and 2 mile,
Yeah.
right? They wiped out 2 whitefish spawning grounds, and the one they want to open up now, it goes into Sturgeon Bay, and that is the last whitefish spawning ground.
So note here, Delaney is talking about introduced species which make a mess of the ecosystem, right? Zebra mussels and carp, which is not an indigenous species, but when you have these species coming in, they damage other resources. And in this case, also whitefish spawning grounds. And whitefish is a very major species for people in this area.
Well, even for fishermen, right? The carp get into their nets and they rip them apart.
The carp will chase away they may chase away the whitefish. The water that's being introduced may chase away the whitefish.
Yeah.
Like Gilbert said, we don't need any more water. He doesn't need a cup. I don't need a centimeter. A centimeter means a foot at my end when a big northwest wind hits. We asked about what the full supply level will be. What are your communications with hydro? They said there was none. They had no comments about our invasive species or our whitefish spawning grounds. And the project is going to happen. Like there's no stopping it. I know they're already doing the survey and the bathymetry testing on that lake outlet, and now they're inviting us to be part of committees to say, well, we're going to destroy your wetland, but we're going to replace it with this one. Mitigations rather than asking us for input.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry I'm interrupting the flow of this. Gilbert, have you been because you're on the same system, have you guys been asked to participate in the same way that Fisher River and the others have in the south end? I mean, it's gonna, like you've talked about how it's gonna affect you, but have you guys been engaged in that consultation yet?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and we talked yesterday a little bit about that. There's starting to be more collaboration within our First Nation communities with that, and we're going to be partnering up exactly that point. But when we're talking about Norway House and Fisher River respectively, our communities, we are usually corralled into speaking with them alone and kind of cutting off that communication because, power is unity, right? and they know how to cut that off. It's a very good colonial tool. But we, like I said, he mentioned yesterday that we are very resilient people, and we're finding new ways to break those barriers. And enough of sitting idle and saying, okay, what's good for us now? We're knocking on the door, we're opening the door now, and we're saying, listen, that's enough of that. This is what we need. This is what we want to partner with. So we're starting to take that initiative now, and I can't wait to start collaborating with our brother, sister community of Fisher River, Cross Lake, because we have a lot of powerful people now. And one more point to that is the elders of yesterday, beautiful, beautiful people. My great auntie was the first female chief in Manitoba. Her name was Jean Falster from Norway House. And I'm glad that we have a panelist going to speak in about, a lot of different topics in that area, because it's so important. That balance is so important to have Indigenous men, Indigenous women together moving forward as we used to do before pre-colonial times. Now it was just basically, we only listen to the male chief. Those days we're coming back to our natural ways, and that's so important in every aspect of society. You got to have that balance and respect moving forward. So
Let's move to the issue of women, role of women, knowledge of women, and of course both.
Yeah.
Would you like to chip in?
Yeah, sure. But I think it's a very broad topic. I'm not sure where I should jump in. But before I start my conversation, I think I would like to go a little bit deeper that what are the root causes of climate change. So as a racialized woman, my current postdoctoral research is that I'm talking to many immigrant women, refugee women, and also indigenous women. So I'm hearing a lot of stories. What is the meaning of climate change? So within racialized group of women, the answer is, most of the time they are saying that they do not know what is the meaning of climate change, because they do not live on the land, and they're like indigenous women, they live directly on the land, the way their life are being impacted. Racialized group of women, they live in urban setup or in a better situation. So it's not impacting them directly. That's the way they are answering sometimes. So at the beginning, I was really very surprised that why they are taking this serious issue like this. And then I started to think that what are the reasons actually? So when I'm trying to share my knowledge about climate change, when I'm saying that colonialism is the root cause of climate change, racism is the root cause of climate change, all the isms are responsible for this. But community people are within racialized community, I do not see that awareness. They do not understand what is the meaning of colonialism, what is the meaning of racism, and how it is the cause for climate change, right? So that's one thing that I'm hearing. And also when also I'm trying to explain or I'm trying to share my perspectives, that separation from land and land-based practices, and also lack of land-based education, monolithic knowledge system, and neoliberal economic model, like this model is teaching us for more profit making, right? So all these reasons, when I'm trying to share, I can see that there is huge knowledge gap. And from your presentation yesterday, you said that climate change has been socially created, and also Dr. also said the same thing. But I would say that it's not only within racialized community of people. In general, there is lack of understanding actually what is climate change and how we can find the solution. And now, if I come back to the women's perspective, so I'm hearing from indigenous women a lot of stories that how they are trying to be resilient, right? So, and also they are mostly sharing the consequences of climate change, like they are facing cultural loss, they are facing language loss, they are losing their hope to raise their children with their indigenous knowledge and indigenous values, family values, community values, right? So all these consequences I'm hearing, but again, I raise the same question, that what is the cause of it? As Dr. said this morning, that how residential school have been impacting, and also we are carrying all those consequences till now. So I think at the end, I just would like to say that women are they're the caregiver of the community and the family, and they're the nurturer of culture, language, and heritage. But women's voices are not being valued. At some point, I'm just hearing all those stories. And also, like recently, I'm coming from Indigenous cultural camp. This July, I was there with the research team. Dr. Doctor and Dr. Margot, they led the team, and that was in Northern Saskatchewan. So I learned a very interesting knowledge from an Indigenous woman that I must share. So she was processing a beaver, and she was teaching us how to process beaver and why we have to respect beaver. So she said that beaver teaches us how to collaborate and to avoid procrastination and delve deeply in beaver symbolism and meaning to find out how this animal spirit guide can help motivate and guide us to teach about relationality and interconnectedness. So I mean, also yesterday when you were talking about, you were advocating for Indigenous knowledge, but I told you that I saved a question: how to build that bridge between Western knowledge and Indigenous knowledge, and also how to bring this knowledge in our everyday practice. So see, the knowledge is there. What is interconnectedness and what is relationality? How many of us do understand? And as a land-based educator and as a lifelong learner of land-based education, I have learned from the Indigenous elders that land is my body. I need to treat the land the way I treat my child. The way I treat my own body, I have to treat my land gently. But today's capitalistic system or today's world system is teaching us to rape the land. So now we need to decide that how we need to bring this knowledge in our everyday practice and how we really can take the responsibility for that.
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering, would you like to jump in on the women's role and related things?
Yes.
Colleen.
In regards to you were talking about the women are coming up and being equal. Before colonialism, before the Europeans came over, we were a matriarchal society, and so colonialism it became a patriarchal society. And so now these women's voices are starting to come up again. So, and that's a good thing. You see more women chiefs across Canada, and nowadays. And then just in regards to the beaver, I just want to tell a story about the beaver. Is that there was a medicine man in the ranch, and he had sled dogs. So he had 6 sled dogs, and they were getting sick, and he was told by a woman elder, knowledge keeper, to feed them beaver because it will heal the dogs. And so he did. He got a beaver, tried to feed the beaver meat to the dogs, and only one of the dogs ate the beaver meat, and he's the only one that survived of that.
Yeah, I have a beaver story to contribute. My main experience with First Nations has been on the Quebec side of James Bay with the Cree community of Chisasibi, and I was talking with one of the teachers, local teachers, herself Cree, and she was teaching Cree education. And she said, we have a major problem in terms of cultural loss. I said, well, how do you figure that? She said, give me a guess. How many women teenagers, girls, know how to skin beaver? And I said, okay, maybe 50%. She said, no, much less, maybe 10%. So this is a major cultural skill that's being lost. And of course, part of that learning to skin animals starts with a very small game, like weasels, squirrels, and you move on to muskrat, and then you move on to beaver, and then So there's a cultural progression on what you learn and what you practice. So if you start losing the front end of that cultural practice, then it becomes really, really difficult. those are the traditional skills, but how about the modern skills? Are the women picking up the modern skills? In many Canadian First Nations, women take care of the household, whether it's the house or the tent or whatever. You deal with what's around the camp where you live, and men typically go farther out. They do the hunting and so on. So my question was, well, if women are doing the household tasks, are they picking up, for example, financial management? So I did an informal, I didn't publish this, there's no book on this, but I asked people, I said, in your family, who deals with the finances? Who's the financial manager? And people looked very puzzled. And the short answer was no one, no one. So women were not picking up, probably your household is different that way, but in many of the First Nations, the old skills are being lost, but also the new skills are really not being picked up.
I want to comment on that. We're Fish River Cree Nation. Very strong women leaders in our community. In the province in general, like you said, we have Grand Chief Matt Merrick, we have Chief Cindy, we have a number of women chiefs, and we have a woman counselor. But at our big table, managers, directors, we meet once every month. We had a really important one in Hecla. We had a death in the community, so everybody came up to the big table. Every manager, every director came out, and our elder brought it up, and he was very proud. He told us about how the women ran the show, ran the camps, ran our lives. They were the water carriers. They carried the teachings of the water. They raised our children. They fed us. It's coming back, and our elder Stanley pointed out that 75% of the people in our managers, directors, most important meeting were women. And that's the way it should be. And that's the way it's heading. And we're not going to stop, and we're proud of our women. So hopefully that's going to carry over across Canada because it's happening in our home.
Yes, some of it is being picked up. Yes, please jump in.
I just have a quick question. It's sort of back a little bit. There's a lot of talk about Manitoba Hydro and the effects of their long-term, large-scale projects on the land. And I get the sense that there's great collaboration between the scientific community and the First Nations community. But my question is, where would you see the relationship between Indigenous communities and corporate entities? That's a really nebulous term, but where would you see that now and in the future?
Well, back in the 70s and early 60s, I guess, back here in Winnipeg, Water Stewardship, with a stroke of a pen, created this whole project, right? No Indigenous information was provided or input. This day is different. Right now, even as we speak, the North Cree Nation is in partnership with the Monago project, which is out of Thompson. It's the nickel belt. So we are looking at resources now within our traditional territory to give us financial freedom. Because right now, as every band almost across Canada depends on the federal government's funding. So we're looking outside of that now and saying, how do we become more independent financially to create treatment centers, more mental health workers, better life for our community members, but keeping our language and our traditions alive. So now we are partners with Flying Nickel, it's called. We're at the table. We're actually partners in this whole, right from the get-go. In 2011, they came and did a presentation on this mining project. We shot it down immediately. Our elders said, absolutely not. This is not meeting any of our environmental demands. So it took over a decade for province of Manitoba and Flying Nickel to basically say, okay, we have to change it up. And now I'm proud to say that just because of those talks, the government of Manitoba called the Monago consultation piece because Norrie Health over a decade said, no, not until we see there's not going to be any damage to more damage to our waters and our land. But we have to be realists as well. We don't want to stay under that same umbrella under the federal government for generations. We're looking at other options now. business partners, as every First Nation community is doing now, becoming partners instead of being people that are getting the crumbs of all these major projects. So that's how we're doing it now with more educated community members, with an elders council, with our First Nation women and men coming at the table, looking at it and saying, what's the pros and cons of these new partnerships for the future? So even though Manitoba Hydro has really did a number on Lake Winnipeg and First Nation communities, like I said, we're very, very forgiving people, and we have to look at, well, how can we change these things and make sure that these practices aren't done like that anymore? So I think that, as our panelists have said, we're moving up in not only our traditional knowledge, but in academia as well, in business, and we're becoming more and more as players and partners, which we should be on our own lands and waters, to make sure that we're moving in the right direction in the future, and we become financially sustainable as well. Because it's not always a good side to a lot of our communities. A lot of suicide, a lot of addictions, unemployment's always 80% or higher. There's a lot of social dynamics that are in play here. But with all that being said, we're still looking at the bright side. We're still looking at solutions, but we have to find that from within first before we can project that out. Meaning that our communities, we have to make our communities healthier, more educated, more sustainable for the future, so we can become a better people for the next generation. We have to prepare our kids for what's coming, because it's changing. Like from the residential schools, 60 scoop, now we're changing into a more a society where, like I said, financial independence is key, but we have to keep making sure we understand where we were and we keep those values. So I hope that kind of answers. Thank you.
I was chatting with Gilbert earlier on, and the title of our workshop is about future generations. Well, it may be too late if we're talking about future generations. So Gilbert was pointing out that the time of change is now, and it's happening. You should see the school complex at Norway House, and now there's a hospital complex as well.
Yeah.
Which I haven't seen. But First Nations are building the infrastructure, and they're pushing to get what they need, because problems are complex. And I'm glad you mentioned the suicides and so on. I mean, this is really, the suicide rates in First Nations is much, much higher than the non-Indigenous population. Food insecurity in First Nations is much, much higher than the non-Indigenous population. There's a whole bunch of interrelated problems. So you have to get that financial security. You have to get partnerships. You have to get hydro to basically share the profits, and that's what's happening. But some of these developments are not all that desirable. Some of the mines make a mess of the land, which is already a bit of a mess to begin with. Right? So First Nations are not always keen to jump into any project.
Yeah, that's true.
Question here.
Speaking
Comment.
of undesirable projects, I'm just curious, like with Lake St. Martin, for example, is it because the lake is under provincial jurisdiction that Manitoba Hydro gets to make decisions about what happens with that body of water? Is that?
I think that correct me if I'm wrong, Delaney, when we asked them the question of what the communication was with Manitoba Hydro, they said little to none. So the province and the designers do not have Manitoba Hydro at the table with them while they're designing the structures. This is where our problem really came from, because as we understand it, Manitoba Hydro does a lot of regulating of Lake Winnipeg. So where does it say in your operating schedule or whatever that how to alleviate the water when you open up the Lake St. Martin gate? Are you going to lower the Manitoba Hydro gate as well? Or no, because that's going to mean we're flooding or we're not flooding. And just to continue on with I think you asked a question about Manitoba Hydro and how we are responsive to other corporations. We're not friends with Manitoba Hydro. They're not friends with us. It's pretty clear what they've done to the lake and they've done to our fisheries. Even right now, when it was built, we had the biggest solar farm in Manitoba, 1 megawatt solar farm. We sell hydro to them, to Manitoba Hydro. They made the agreement pretty much and we had to sign it. So we sell our hydro to them, but only on non-after hours. So from 5 o'clock till 6 a.m. That's when they open up and we start selling hydro to them. They buy hydro from us at 0.12 kilowatt per hour, say, then they sell it back to us at 0.24. Is our hydro even leaving the reserve before they're profiting off of it, off of our solar farms, and our 4 acres of land that is taking up?
You know, that's a really, really good point, because in some countries, independent producers of power get the peak kilowatt fee. But in Manitoba, you're getting the lowest, right? And then hydro actually makes profit
And then they're
out
selling
you
it back to
rather
us?
than the other way around. So these are the kinds of barriers that First Nations face when they're trying to get a financial base.
Yeah, and the only way a lot of this is going to stop is by tables such as this, where non-Indigenous, Indigenous community scholars, like I said before, is getting the word out there. Let's do something better. Let's change this for tomorrow, right? I think that advocacy spreads right across the board, as Dr. Ahmed has pointed that out yesterday. We're doing a great job, but we can do a lot better. And I think that the 63 First Nation communities in Manitoba are starting to come together now. And as everybody knows, we have our first Indigenous Premier of Manitoba, which is kind of a breath of fresh air, but he has to walk a balanced line as well. Like, he has to make sure that he's still a government employee, a provincial, but he's not at the federal level. And for us as Indigenous people, it's nice to see that, but at the same time, still getting his orders from Ottawa. So we got to remember that as well.
Yeah, and of course, you'll face some of the same barriers that First Nations face now. Okay, we had a comment or question.
Yeah, I have a question on some of the topics, and it's all kind of interrelated, so please bear with me. Based on what you're describing, with issues popping up within culture that are a function of poverty.
Can you speak up, please? Respect for elders. All that.
Sorry. Based on what is being described, there's deficits of like infrastructure and community and cultural spaces that allow the culture to develop into itself. So I guess my question here is, what does right look like? What does the right future look like? Is it a mixture of infrastructure for like internet to increase employability, to allow access to healthcare? Is it more, better third spaces? I know there's a discussion outside of the depth of the third space. There's no community square anymore. And Facebook comments are really community square. So what does right look like? Is it, more cultural investment, more investment into people on isolated communities? Is it more employment opportunities through the internet and getting people coding courses or healthcare that can be administered 2,000 kilometers away? Or is it, I guess it's a very open-ended question, and I apologize for that, but what does right look like? What does the future?
Well, I don't know, you want me to jump in there?
You could take it first.
What does right look like? That's a really open question, and I don't think that there's a simple answer to that. All I can say is that today is a part of that change, and tomorrow will be part of that change. Right might look like is when there's equality for all Canadians. There's no more water boil advisories, and stuff like that, so on and so forth. Because of a lot of our communities are inland in northern, like in northern Saskatchewan and like all across Canada, northern Manitoba is no different, right? We need connectivity. We need a lot of stuff like that just to keep up to the modern pace. Because basically Canadian society, we live in what we do here and live and breathe in the cement jungles and try to carve out a living for ourselves. But in the north, there's a lot of other hurdles that we have to overcome, and that's going to take time. And I think that there's Indigenous people here that I'm very proud of, that they're in the university, and when they get to be my age, I'm hoping that they can answer more of those questions, because the evolution of change is always going. But for us as Indigenous people, we're playing catch up to this society because the door was closed for us for 30 years or whatever it was. And then finally we looked around, hey, what's going on down south, you know? So now we have to catch up, but in a good way, because society brings all social issues coming to light big time. It hits us like a tsunami. That's why you're having all these, our young people are suffering greatly with addictions and suicide thoughts and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of stuff that comes into play there through, not only through the Western side, but the cultural side. It's an ongoing process in my view. Maybe that counselor will want to talk to that.
Gilbert, I have one question to the panelists, because you have three communities here. Say, for example, evacuation during disasters, major flooding or wildfire. It has been traditionally very top-down, because most of the reserves are under federal jurisdiction, and province has the ownership of natural resources, forestry, and others. So there are contradictions, so on. And these remote communities got caught in between, and they're evacuated without any consultation, anything. Is it changing at all that if there is evacuation today, tomorrow, would there be a consultation? Would these indigenous communities be consulted in evacuation decision, or still in a very traditional way? Because you talked about making these bridges.
You're scaring me over here. You're terrifying me.
So-
That's not what happens at all.
So, yeah, no, I would like to hear from them,
Yeah,
what is their feeling and so
Yeah.
on. So, so, and is there any bridge really happening, and what needs to be done? Because we need to talk and then, get
Absolutely,
things
yeah.
done.
No, I think there's, it's becoming a lot better, and I'll let my colleagues speak to that as well. It's becoming a lot better, the transition, the openness, and everything else like that. First and foremost, the 1930 Natural Resource Transfer Agreement. I absolutely oppose that, and I'm sure that my colleagues from the Indigenous communities absolutely as well. And basically what that is was the federal government giving Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta the right to handle their own resources and tell us what to do. And they cut that. We're basically, through our treaties, work with the federal government. So that thing has been totally done without our say. So that's number one. Number two, and I think that there's a point now where Indigenous, like you said, communities are having more of a say, right? 40 years ago or 30 years ago, and those kind of timelines, it was kind of parachute in, let's get them out, let's make sure everybody's safe. But now it's changing. And it's through collaboration and it's through partnership that we're learning and adapting together. And I think that that's how I see it. And I think my colleagues basically stated that as well, but I'd like to throw it to them and let them comment a little bit.
Yes, in Saskatchewan too, yeah.
Yeah, so Saskatchewan, like just for my First Nation, like in 2015, when we were all evacuated, like definitely the chief, she was very disappointed that, these firefighters were sent away and then tried to be recalled back. Because we, Indigenous peoples, we have a lot of knowledge and expertise in different areas. And to not be included at the table and in those decision makings is, it's not very good for us. And if we're going to move forward, we definitely have to have collaboration and partnerships with agencies and whatnot. So I think since that 2015, they've done more preparedness for wildfires, because we know there's going to be wildfires every year. We know that for a fact. And we do had some flooding. The Montreal River flooded a couple of times, and then this year, but it's low. The water is low this year. But we've had flooding, we've had wildfires, and just, we have a lot of storms. There was, like last year's a big snowstorm that there was, we were without power. The town of Laurent, they're all without power for 3 days. And because I live on a chop line, I already have a generator. It didn't really affect me because I lived on a chop line for 2.5 years, and I was commuting back to work every day for 2.5 years. So I wasn't affected, but everybody else was.
For Fisher River, like I said, we do not want to be evacuated. We don't want to leave our homes. We don't want our elders to be displaced and put under stress. but it does happen. Some things that we're doing to try and stay at home is after we had a big evacuation due to a wildfire. I think it was in the 80s. We put a genset, big generator in our personal care home, so our elders can stay home no matter what. We're currently looking into more gensets or more alternative power, so we could maybe power up the community hall, and that could be an evacuation station, or maybe the band office too, so we could keep our council chambers running. And the other one was the news store. We really need the gas pumps working, so we're trying to get a generator to run those, so that it could also keep us in the community more so. And we went without power too. It was to one of those spring snows where the power lines get iced up, and they took down the network, and we were out of power for how many days?
5 days.
5 days, 6 days, 5 nights. And most everybody stayed home. We were running around taking generators to people's homes so they could get the pumps going, and the food was outside in coolers, and everybody tried to stay home again. And I guess the last point about evacuation is my leadership. My Chief Crate has been a chief, feels like forever, and he does. I don't think my leadership is the type to get pushed around or muscled around by anybody. So when it comes to decisions that are made on the betterment of his community, our community, and our elders, we take the lead on that.
And, I just want to make one more comment. Excellent commentary. Lake St. Martin. I have friends there, and that was one of the devastating evacuated communities in our history of Manitoba. Almost 20 years, and the elders from that community died in Winnipeg in hotel rooms. It's just a tragedy, and that's the exact example of what we don't want happening anymore. And it shouldn't happen. And you shouldn't be able to uproot a community and say to them, "You're not living here anymore." Like, those days are so over, and we have to learn these important lessons. And like I said, it takes a whole community to make change, and that means this Indigenous knowledge intertwined in Brandon and everywhere else, like the gentleman was talking about yesterday. And I'm really thankful that everybody's taking this in. And like I said, it's nice that we do this at a forum like this, but behind closed doors. And when we all go home, that's where the real change happens. We got to remember that, because what we relate to our kids and our grandchildren basically gives them that blueprint of tomorrow. So we want to make sure that our kids and grandkids are educated and healthy in all aspects of life, so we can live together.
Could I make a quick comment? Yeah. So basically, I brought this up so that we understand. We're talking about making bridges, but what are those bridges in specific terms? So this is an example that where we need to make bridges, and the consultation with the Indigenous community, First Nations communities cannot take place during emergencies. There's no time, right? Within 24 hours time, you have to evacuate. So the time for consultation during the normal period. And that's why what Gilbert has suggested is go home, and in our workplace, we need to start making changes during our normal, this type of conversations, and in our workplace, not during emergencies. That's why I brought this up, that we need to make these bridges by thinking and by doing and making changes.
And doing it now, and not for future generations.
Yeah.
This is happening now. I want to build on what you were saying earlier. Part of the problem, of course, is systemic, right? Systemic in the sense that First Nations ended up getting marginal land. So St. Martin's suffers because they're very flood prone to begin with. And it's not just hydros projects in the 70s. There was Cedar Lake development back in the 60s. Does that touch your area? Not much. But that made a mess of the land, but also made a mess of the land-based economy. In other words, food people were getting from the land, and this kind of thing continues. But the First Nations are taking more power to themselves. They say there's no such thing as self-empowerment, in the sense that all empowerment is self-empowerment. So you have to take charge, and that's what they're doing. So you're producing power, but you run into the systemic problem that you have to sell it below cost, sort of.
Gentlemen,
And that, yeah. Yes.
Thank you. You brought up the next generation and kids. I would just like to kind of hear your opinion in transferring that knowledge down to our next generation. We all have, most of us have kids, and we see some of those challenges. What are you experiencing, and what does that look like from your lens?
Well, I kind of have two perspectives. I grew up in the city of Winnipeg because of my mother was in residential school, and she passed away at an early age when we were kids. So my dad had to raise 5 children on his own in Winnipeg. I didn't know who I was. I called myself a city Indian because I was looking and I was like, why am I getting called these names? And this is in the 70s. I mean, it wasn't cool to be what I am today.
You know, you're cool.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but I learned these lessons along the way. It's adaptation. It's growing. I'm proud to say that I grow every generation. I'm growing with my grandchildren now, and my children have, of course, they have children. I'm teaching them who they are, but to respect other people, respect the diversity, which is Canada now. And that's, we all have to do that behind closed doors. And I think kids, they're like sponges. And I talked to somebody about this lesson. Here's one of the most important lessons I learned in my life. When my son was 5 years old, he was in daycare. So I went to go and I was observing him through the window and how they're interacting. And there was kids, there was Black kids, First Nation kids, East Indians, Asian kids, all giving each other hugs and sharing. And to me, that was the most purest, beautiful form of interrelationships I've ever seen in my life. But at what point does that child get 8, 9, 10 years old where that thing starts to change, where hate comes in, racism comes in, the different opinions and stuff like that? So we got to go back to those young kids, and that's where we have to really plant those seeds. And I call myself not an IK, but a Indigenous knowledge farmer, because everywhere I go, I'm spreading seeds, even today. And everybody should be like that, and just do what you can, especially in your own home, because that's where it all starts. Because if you're not doing it at home, you have no right to talk about it here. I really believe that. So I think that's.
I just want to say, as a professor, I taught Indigenous studies for university students for 4 years. And one of the things that I say at the end of each semester is that now that you know this knowledge, you have that responsibility to go and take this knowledge and talk about it to your friends and family at the dinner table when you're going out or whatever. This is your responsibility now. Now that you know this knowledge, you can't keep it within yourself. You have to spread that knowledge to other people. Yeah. And then just in regards to colonialism on canvas, I do that with every class, Indigenous class that I had. And what it was, I did the workshop with them, and then one of my assignments was an art project, and it was, you have to depict who you are as Cree, Dene, Michif, or Métis, and through art. So you have to write a one-page paper about who you are as a Cree, who you are as a Dene. Give me your background, maybe say a little bit about your grandmother. And then from what you read, I want you to paint a picture in any medium form, in art. And then I put their artwork in an art gallery in La Ronge. And sometimes I made the students do their own presentation of their artwork, and then they have to describe their artwork as well. So it was very
well. We're solidly in the bridging, and art is used. You missed the early presentation yesterday. We're talking about use of art as a way of. We haven't had comments from you for a while, Zehunesa. You want to jump in on bridging theme?
Sure. So both of your broad questions, short answer I'm trying to give you. So I'm an anti-racist educator and a social justice activist. It's a long time now. Um, so what I see that we start to teach anti-racism or decolonial education at the university level when we are all spoiled already. What I feel as an educator, we need to introduce this education from day one. So this environmental justice education, social justice education, decolonial education, and also indigenous knowledge sharing education, it needs to be introduced from day one, for sure. That's what I believe. And also, we need to include indigenous knowledge in management and mainstream curriculum. We talk about decolonize our education, and how. So, and how does it look like? That's the question that often I hear from my students and also from the community, how to do it. So as a mother, I realize that it's too late that I will teach my children anti-racism when they will take a course in the university. So as a mother, what I have started to do with my children, maybe I can share that story. So during my doctoral journey, I lived in Saskatoon for the last 10 years. So in Saskatoon, me and Ranjan and my family and also community children, we took the responsibility for a community garden. So in that community garden, we used to offer environmental justice education, feminist education, anti-racist education, and also we used to invite many indigenous elders, activists, and scholars and educators. So they used to come and mingle with our racialized group of children and also with the international students. So that's the way, 10 years we continued that project, and 10 years my family, me and Ranju, we dedicated ourselves so much to build informal learning spaces around the community. And that's what my whole doctoral journey, and I have written 250 pages. I'm not telling you to read 250 pages, but I'm just telling you to take the spirit of this work, because it was as a newcomer women, that was for our survival reason that we started to do it, and without knowing the benefit of doing this kind of work, but it impacted my life, my family's life, and my community life, community children's life, and other international students' life. So yeah, I think I will stop here.
Yeah, please jump in.
So I think this is a good time for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 students here can tell us a little bit about what you think, the things that we're talking about, the education, things we're talking about young people. And I'm pretty sure the system we have, the forces are very strong, right? So we're all product of capitalism, right? So, and you are living with it, living with climate change and also so forth. And you're in school. Anything you can think of, there may be huge gaps that we're talking about. And then tell me, yes. Okay, so yeah,
Sure, I can
yeah,
speak on that a little bit. So
just
I'm a fourth year applied science and emergency studies student. So Dr. Yusui and Dr. Spence are some of my professors. But as a student at this university, something that's just becoming implemented is, I think it's next year it comes into effect, is that there's a requirement for Indigenous classes. There's a requirement to take at least, I think it's 1, maybe 2 Indigenous classes throughout the course of every degree program, no matter if they're arts, sciences, nursing, music, whatever. And I'm on the grunt end for that, so if you enroll before a specific time, you're not required to take that. However, I think that's a wonderful thing. Like, I think that that gap is starting to be mitigated when we're talking about learning Indigenous practices and knowledge and how it can be applied to us in the real world. So I think that's a wonderful indication that the Garden University has certain implement, which is great.
My name is Callum Coswell. I'm a third-year sociology student here at Brandon University. And I guess I have a question for the panel members, more specifically the council members, is how is it, how can, you retain the youth? Because obviously, how it is today, much of them are moving out of the communities, coming to get the education and stuff, and how are you guys, attempting to bring them back into the community? As you guys mentioned, there's unemployment and other issues concerning that, maybe the lack of housing, and just how are you trying to retain the youth capital?
Here's a funny kind of answer to that. I'm no longer in council, but I was councilor vice chief 2014 to 2018. All of my education that I've got through my BAs and through my masters, all when I was living in Norway House, all my education. And people said, that's so backwards. Like, what's all that about? I went back home. I had an opportunity to not only find out where I was from, but seeing a chance to do that education piece right there. And now I got the young Indigenous folks back home coming to me saying, yeah, but you got those things on your wall. And I said, yeah, I do. But I said, I got those here. I obtained them while I'm living in the community. And I'm so proud of that because it shows our young people that anything is possible. You can get your education, you can come back home. And the thing that I would like to talk about when it's First Nation leadership is now we're starting to see a trend. And I always push for this trend for at least 25 years, is that when the changeover for council and chiefs, sometimes it's 3 years, 4 years, we have to pass that knowledge on. That's our responsibility as leaders from the community, from your members. You have to pass that on to the next chief, the next councillor, just to make sure that we're always going up. We're not throwing everything off the table and taking 2 steps back. We can't afford to do that. We have to continue to pass that knowledge on to the next leadership. And we can't have no division. We can't have no fighting about who gets in. It's a really big responsibility to be a leader in the communities, as the councillor is going to talk about now. And I take that as one of my pride and joy moments of the education piece, being a leader in the community. And now I get to go all across the globe and advocate for what I know and what I've done in my career. Last thing I'll say, I had a really good stay in New Zealand. Then we jumped across to Australia. So there's a triangle effect of colonialism in these 3 parts of the world. So in New Zealand, we went to the Maori Health Center as scholars from University of Winnipeg and Manitoba. And so here's one of the beautiful things. That guy says, hold on a second, you're our guest. Somebody's going to sing you in. I thought, oh my God, somebody's coming out with a guitar? What's going on? So this beautiful lady, a Maori lady, came and started singing in this most beautiful voice, and she kept going like this, follow me. And she sang us into that health center. And then we sat in a circle and started talking about the issues of North America, of Canada, Indigenous people, and what's happening in New Zealand. And it was just like we're having a conversation today, because the similarities are so the same, because of colonization. Everything we talked about, from CFS to suicide, opioids, incarceration, was just like I was talking to a person here in Manitoba or Saskatchewan. And I found that very, very unique, and in a way, such a learning experience. So, and that happened in Australia, and it happened here in Manitoba. So I got to do all these things, and I'm very, very humble about it, and very fortunate that I'm speaking with all of you today, as we all are, because this is what education brings. This is what Indigenous knowledge brings. It gives you that opportunity to advocate. And our young people, yeah, there's a shortage of homes and stuff like that, but that's why the financial freedom comes into play. We can create more opportunities and make our communities more healthy. Because without a home fire, a healthy home fire, without education and a home, we're still struggling. So that's kind of the piece that I wanted to share.
I have a little bit of an interesting story about my education and my career and how I come home. I'm a commercial fisherman by trade. My father, my father's father's father came from the Orkney Isles to Lake Manitoba, Lake Winnipeg specifically, to fish. So I was a commercial fisherman till 22 years old, when my dreams of the NHL were dashed, and I went back to school. I went to civil engineering technology. I'm a certified engineering technologist. I graduated at Red River College. After that, I got my first job at Ducks Unlimited here in Brandon. I learned about wetlands more and the conservation programs. We did the Delta Marsh carp exclusion. I learned about invasive species. From there, I went back to the city of Winnipeg for 2 years, engineering department. I did roads. Didn't like the roads, didn't like being in the city. Got a job at a private engineering firm, Ashcombe Engineering, where we did medium to large capital projects for reserves. So now I'm back on the reserve, but I'm using the knowledge that I've gained through my schooling and my last job and I'm taking it onto the reserve, to 2 reserves. I'm the middleman now between the technologists, the tech engineers, and the First Nations themselves, the band leaders. I did that for 5 years, and then Fisher River in 2021 passed the land code. The land code, we became the 103rd land code community in Canada. It removed 45 sections of the Indian Act, and we took power of specifically the land and resources ourselves. I had a couple meetings with Fisher River leadership. The last meeting I went there to tell them, no, I can't do it. I can't move home. I have a job, I have a wife. I have too many things to do. They brought me in a trailer, they employed my wife, they gave me lots of money. They made me emotionally invested in the job by saying, if you don't come out and somebody else gets this job and they fail, maybe it's on you, kind of thing, but not like that, right? We didn't say it like that, but yeah, my meeting, my 2-hour drive out there to say no turned into a 2-hour drive back home, trying to figure out a way to tell the wife, I think we're moving back to Fisher River. So I've been there for 2 years now. I got 2 children. I went there with 2 children. We've since adopted a daughter there, so now we have 3 children. My wife will be finishing her university next year, and hopefully we'll be sticking around a little longer. But yeah, that sort of was a full circle. I went out to the world, got my job, got my career, but the reserve called me back to a job that I couldn't say no to. So, keep your education, but always remember where you're from, and then hopefully you can get that dream job like that.
Yeah, Cliff, that's a beautiful story.
True, too.
So is Gilbert.
But I just want to add a few to this question here. I guess, on reserves, some reserves are small, some reserves are bigger. Shortage of houses, like Gilbert said, right? So when our young adults grow up, they graduate, they move away from the reserve to go to school. So they're looking for a career that takes them, will keep them off the reserve, because there's nothing, right? When you come back to reserve, you're living in a house with 4 families, right? Overcrowding, and they want to have families, so they're looking outside the box. Hey, this is my better option for me and my family. And maybe it's reserves just can go and take land here and start another community, whatever, right? Where we're fine to this little box that we're put on. So, and we can't be competitive with wages outside the communities. And it's especially with prices, inflation going through the roof. Now more people are looking to leave the community, to move to Winnipeg, move to Brandon, outside away from our community. So our hands are tied with how do we get them back, right? Which is sad to say, but we are losing more and more people to urbanized areas. And so Chief and Council hands are tied when it comes to funding. We wish we could offer them what they deserve for their diplomas, degrees, whatever, but it's not happening. And it's really hard to get our own band members to come back. If you have a doctor, if you have a dentist that just graduated, lawyers that want to come back to our community, but we can't give them what they deserve.
We have teachers, sorry to cut you off, Counselor. We have so many teachers. We don't have no place for them to live. We have great teachers, and Connor Murdoch. We can't bring them back because we don't have the means to make them comfortable.
Yeah, well, it is a dilemma of First Nations people moving to cities. About half of First Nations people in Canada live in cities and not in their home communities. But it cuts both ways. On the one hand, it's sort of disruptive. I've heard people in Cross Lake say that families spend part of the year in Winnipeg, part of the year in Cross Lake, and the kids are lost because it disrupts the school. On the other hand, a lot of people, including many of your panelists, have benefited from having a foot on both sides. You've done well, you've done well. I guess it's almost like back to our, to our seeing. In other words, the challenges you had growing up in Winnipeg and also with your kids has made you stronger. And you can deal with both worlds. You've been a counselor, but you've also been successful as an urban person doing things. And I think Cliff's story is really good that way because, here you are as an engineer, you can interact with engineers who are non-Indigenous and who are coming to do things. And so that's the kind of bridge building that's necessary, except, of course, in this case, you've adapted their language rather than the outsiders adapting the language of knowledge and practice in your community. But that's going to continue as a dilemma, but it has both the negatives and the positives that go with it.
So can we go?
Yes.
Let's go next. Any comments? The student? As a student? Now, do you need a minute?
Yeah.
Reese?
Who's shy?
Everybody's shy.
I guess back to like the youth and like how we can bring the youth more into the climate conversation is like the way I see all of you is you are the ones that planting the seeds into like our young brains, and then it's our responsibility now to give it to the younger generations. So like should us, like people who are younger and are coming here to learn from the older generations, like should we be the ones going to the schools, talking to the children directly to make an impact? Because like, yeah, there's so much you can do on technology and on social media, but like this generation is so lazy, you need to force it on the people and be present and actually speak to them. Like before yesterday, I don't think I would have cared about climate or anything climate change related and like the youth generations, but now I feel like I have the responsibility that I need to go to schools and do workshops of my own and teach people. Because like who's actually out there? Like I don't know if there's anybody talking to the children. You can say so much, but who's actually doing it? And yeah, it's just a thing that's in the back of my head is like, should I be looking more into going and physically speaking to people and like kids and stuff and putting all this new information in their brains? Because like, I'm 20 and this is the first time I'm hearing about a lot of this stuff and a lot of the unfortunates that have been brought up. But now who's going and saying it to other kids or people younger than me?
Yes, definitely.
Yes, definitely.
For I would seek out youth conferences and be a presenter at youth conferences because you're a young person. In most youth conferences all have adults who are doing the presenting, and my daughter. I got her a couple of times to be at a youth conference, even for my band, and she was the only young person, young presenter at that youth conference. Everybody else was an adult, and I'm just like, you need more youth presenters like her. So, definitely, if there's youth conferences out there, and you think you have a look at what the theme is and see and present yourself as I'd like to present, I'd like to be a presenter and because you guys have knowledge, you guys are educated, and you guys will be able to give that knowledge to the young people as opposed to us old fogies being, I'm in that boat down today. Because I think the young people learn more from the youth, like who are in their between 20s and 30s, as opposed to us, yes, we're educated and we have now a lot of knowledge, but they're going to listen to the young people.
Yeah, this may be the opportunity for us to support you with to do something, right? Okay, Sydney.
Hi, I'm Sydney. I'm doing my second degree here. I did a first degree in business, and now I'm doing geography with a minor in disaster studies. So I guess I came to this workshop hoping to kind of be like, okay, how can I work on climate change? What can I do as an individual? And so I guess that's kind of my question, kind of works off hers and the question you got earlier. What can I do with the resources I have to help or like make a difference?
Well, like I said before, I think that everybody is as an Indigenous knowledge farmer. And this young lady and these young people that are sitting around this table are already ready to pick up the oats and start flinging them, right? And it's so important. And educators do that all the time. People that are sitting around are great guests from all over and local and Brandon here. We're all doing that. We kind of coined it Indigenous knowledge farmers. That's what I call it. But you guys are doing the same with that great presentation about disaster and flooding in the city with our armed forces. Some really great words were spoken yesterday. And like I said before, that's the collaboration effect, right? That's what we all can do when we put our mind to it, because we can make the change. We are obligated to do so. We all care. We all have one thing in common. We all care about our children and our future generations, our grandchildren. That's a universal yes everywhere across the board. So it's up to us to make that change. Like I said, it's so important to do it at home, right? I went to hundreds of conferences, but I know for a fact that when we go home and we shut the door and we talk to our friends, oh, what was all that about? Geez, I just want to relax now. I heard enough of this, right? But we have to change that as well. We have to have our mini conferences with our kids and our grandkids too. And maybe we're going to plant some seeds and make them a great advocate of their own rights to make change on the Canadian side or the Indigenous side. So that's the message I hear from our younger people. And I'm so happy to see you here today. There's a lot of, like you said, older folks. I can only speak for myself, but it's nice to see that. It has to be that way. It's the ebb and flow of learning. It starts and it dips and dives, right? So, but no, that's great.
Susie, our knowledge keeper.
I just want to say that I attended a conference at Western University talking about decolonizing education and institutions. And one of the presenters said that her role is curriculum adaptation. And she said half of the job of change is preparing people for change, helping them to understand what happened and the effects of what the influences are on the way things are, understanding a little bit of that. And that's kind of why I talk about knowing our own personal stories, knowing the stories of our nations. And she said, so half of the work is preparing people to be prepared for change. And I think, I know that ongoing conversations is probably one of the least value-based. Because if we had ongoing conversations like this, it would be it would be in front of us all the time, and we would be. And I think as we sit together, a vision or a way appears, and the change that begins in each one of us. So I think that's really important. And it's not just one thing; it's a whole process. And understanding ways of doing things. And so one of the things that here we have the teachings house, and it's not everything, and it's not, but it's part of helping people to understand that Indigenous knowledge and teachings is very important, and that there needs to be a balance in education. I spoke to a psychologist not that long ago, and they were asked to help in a community where they live here in Canada, and they said that they're just a recent grad. They said that there was not anything in their training that would help them to be of any help to Indigenous people. And so we really do have to look at the education and then the balance of the knowledge systems and gathering on a regular basis. I just have to say, as a 21-year-old, just a month after I turned 21, I was struggling in my life, and I went for help, and I've been a part of recovery circles for 42 years now, and just being there and listening on a regular basis transformed my whole life and way of being and thinking about myself as an Indigenous person. So ongoing conversations are really important. And even the first 5 years I was at Edison, I didn't say anything because I just didn't even know that I could say anything. But it is, and a big part of my own learning has been to attend anything and everything that I could learn from. So the informal learning that somebody mentioned is really critical. We must not think that only formal education system, and so that's where Indigenous knowledge comes into, because there's all kinds of informal learning opportunities when it comes to Indigenous knowledge. So I just want to say
In Fisher River 20 years ago, we brought out consultants to do a community plan. We interviewed the youth. In Fisher River historically, 100 years ago was all Christian, pure Christianized. We lost our culture through residential schools, and when our community started, when we left our relatives in Norway House in 1880, it was a Christian community.
We never forgot.
we took the treaty bull and we went south. So again, the output from the youth portion in the community plan was the youth want to know their culture. They want to know their language. They want to know their ceremonies again. Fast forward 20 years, we got powwow, we have Sundance, we have sweats, we have Cree again. My sons speak better Cree than I ever have. We have outdoor education. And now we're getting into food sovereignty. The next thing that we're getting into is we know we can't afford the food. Fantastic. And as our relative pointed out, we were specifically moved down to Fisher River to become agricultural opportunities. We have 14% of our land is only suitable for any kind of opportunity. So we don't have that land base right now. We're learning. So we're getting into food sovereignty, and we're getting it into the schools. Wow. And we're going to try, the plan is to have greenhouses and growing in modular containers, but having the kids learn how to do it and why we're doing it at the early age.
And
Dr. Spence, and then
I just want to say, as you mentioned before too, we have the largest solar panel farm, and we have 250 of our homes are geothermal.
So we're trying to get it. We're taking the proactive steps, but also it has to be carried over to the next generation, and that has to be brought in through the education system.
I just wanted to add to the response of our young student who wants to know, how might I, as an individual, contribute to change? It is important that you regard change as a process, and like all processes, change has to be informed. I think that information that will affect change is reflected in you being here today, because you're at the point, you're affecting change at this point by being here today and learn and understanding what is needed. So rest assured, you are, as we speak, a part of the change.
thank you, Christina.
So you kind of stole my thunder because you said it much better than how I'm about to say it, but to kind of build on your question, I think whether it's, what can you do about climate change or emergency management or indigenous knowledge or all of them wrapped up together. It is about participating and listening and then becoming the advocate. I'm not Indigenous, but I want to learn more. I want to hear, I want to listen, and then I want to share that knowledge and be an advocate for the Indigenous people, for climate change, to help better, the impacts that they suffer when climate change disasters happen and impact them more than others. It's about being an advocate as much as you can, but you have to do the learning and the listening first.
Great, thanks. Okay, one more comment, and then I have a few things to say too.
Yeah, I just had a quick comment about this too. It's very interesting to think about affecting change. Obviously, we all want to affect change in a positive way, I think. But like, I work for Parks Canada, which is a very colonial institution. And like, my 2 cents on affecting change is just be the person in the room that says the thing. So, you get into operations or you get into different categories and you forget that in your management plan, you said you want to include Indigenous partners in decision-making because you're busy and you're doing things, and you just be that person in the room that's like, okay, and then also, how are we decolonizing this process? Because it doesn't happen if no one brings it up. And so every time you're involved, with an institution or when you get an opportunity, just saying the thing like, okay, so we were talking about including Indigenous partners. How are we doing that? So yeah, just bringing it up and being that person. Not everyone will be happy about having to talk about multiple aspects or dimensions of projects, but somebody has to, and often it doesn't happen because no one just brings it up. So that's my little 2 cents about affecting change.
Okay, thank you. We're going to conclude soon, but I have a slide which I think captures some of this complexity. If I can get this, Sakib, maybe help you.
When you were preparing, can I just take 1 minute to respond to her?
Yes.
Yeah. So I loved it. I loved it. As an academic, we talk a lot. And as a member of the research community, I believe that we don't need any more research. We need action. What you are talking about is all about action. And be the change. Be courageous. So, I mean, who would be that person? We always look forward, right? Why I cannot be that person? Or why you cannot be that person? So that should be our goal. And also that is a part of our decolonial process too, because we are benefiting from this colonial system. We are benefiting from
That's
this
that single
system.
slide.
That's why we don't want to talk, or we don't want to take a
Which
stand.
still is separated
talk for
from the
justice,
other
right?
PowerPoint.
Because we didn't learn how to use my privilege. So we need to learn, unlearn, and relearn to deconstruct myself first. And we need to take that courage to be the change maker. Thanks.
Thank you. I did promise after that 11:15 as scheduled. But I do have a few things to say. It's not some of the bigger picture issues that I wanted to talk about. The saying comes from Australian Indigenous people. Healthy country, healthy people. It's about the relationship between communities and the land that supports them. I do have a major interest in Indigenous. And the argument here is that you have the land, which as an ecologist I would call the ecosystem, but it's really land with people on it. And that land makes healthy people, and healthy people make healthy land. So there is a relationship between the land and the people in a way that mutually supports one another. Now, what we're seeing with climate change is that the land is being impacted So there's a bad influence, if you like, on the ecosystem that supports people. On the other hand, the individuals, the communities, the social group in many of the First Nations have social problems. The two are related. So the Fisher River mentions food sovereignty, which means not just sufficient food in terms of calories, but being able to control the food you produce, and it's the food you want to consume. That's food sovereignty. So to get that food sovereignty, you need healthy land, and that healthy land is being impacted. So our immediate concern is natural hazards and climate change. But in fact, that is related to the healthy communities where the people have been separated from the land base that they've always depended on. And that was in the previous presentation about how the land and people got separated. So the idea is that we should be thinking about the whole cycle. Not only a healthy community needs healthy land, but also the healthy land needs a healthy community. So that's my grand synthesis. Thank you. And I guess unless you have other comments, that concludes our panel.
Coffee break for 15 minutes. Coffee break.
Yes. So we have coffee break for 15 minutes.
I want to delete it from here.
Sure.
I didn't record it.
Yeah. Wow, it's,
Thanks, Dr.
Yeah, no, I know, it really was.
yeah.
So we need to put it together either
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, so fill it up twice, but when you go Right? Yeah. You up against. So do that and keep this. Yes, fine. But just not to be separate from. So keep that for 6 minutes and I'll be because that's the what that's the because you keep it we cannot use any perspective. We cannot reuse. So we can take it to NRI, right?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so the base, I mean, everything we can keep it. So we just need to print this, right?
Yes.
So it's better to if I keep it,
Yes, I think it's better if you just.
So once today we were after so let's put my card and then we keep it.
And those things also I think that should be also go to NRI.
Yeah.
Because like it's CDSN one.
Yeah.
So it's a common one for CDSN.
Right. So who kept it? Is Kausar or you kept it?
That's not. So it's better if you just keep it in NRI.
Yeah.
So for the if we have any next event, if we have any next workshop, CDSN.
Sure. I'll put it in NRI research room. Yes.
So then we can like wrap it up in 3 of the banners can go there.
Yeah.
And we have one extra banner, so it will go with you in NRI as a symbol of.
Do you have any access to research room? Can you put it there in NRI? Because I'm just thinking that if I take with my card,
You can give it to other place. Here's a room there.
Okay. Yeah, okay, let's give it to others then. And then we can put it in that research room because others is key to that research. Let's do that.
So all set, sir?
Yes. So we'll wrap it up and but give all the receipts to me and I have everyone. So what the Kausar has got, so you just scan them and give it to me and then I'll put it together because I have to submit everything to.
Yes, I signed that already and it was no need for
Right.
So we need only a few clouds.
The area.
Yes, there we go, that's a good Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
like there's.
Yeah.
We're expanding our activities for that. So there's lots of there for
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, we got our families are outside and we're gonna
Oh, really? They're in the yeah, look at And I think so what you're graduating this year, so now Wow. Right. Yeah. Wow. Really? Yeah, that's good. No matter It was good, and really good, and actually one of Jack's counterparts. There's responsibilities, but we can provide the overseeing governance. So it was good. It was a lot of good conversation. So I always think back to interesting. So I can see this very relevant. You ever just feel like it's not no, it is. That's a dynamic of it because absolutely. Yeah. So are you like gonna stay? I guess we're on the job taken. Right. Wow.
Bishi boro hole. তোমরা কি আজকে ব্যাক করবা? কার সাথে তুমি একা আসছো?
Sir, we came with a student van.
আজ স্টুডেন্ট ব্যান ও ব্যানে আসছো?
Well, a lot of it really is
So we are giving
Priority.
No worries.
Oh.
So I'll start. I think coffee time is over. So have your coffee, but our conversation should be start. So thanks for coming back. So we want to give some gifts first. So it's over to you.
On behalf of the whole show. Organizer, thank you so much for coming. And then so it's not over yet.
Oh, is it? You should have gave me this then.
You can read.
Thank you very much.
Just go to the phone.
Thank you so much for your contribution and for your blessings and wisdom. Wonderful. Seven. These two.
Yeah.
It's the bus pass.
Yeah.
Winner is.
This is a look at the logistics side of it. Please, can you come to the front, please?
Because this is workshop is about future generations, so we'd like to honor our students. To give them hope.
Yeah. Just slide over.
Thank you so much for. You should give some notes to this one.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and stay for still whole time, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. Always.
Thank you so much. I think maybe personally, but there's something you can do. So, yeah.
Second final is.
We'll stop you.
Okay, so last 2 days, 1.5 days, we heard from different individuals, their personal stories, their community stories, but also we heard from different institutions because we represent also not only ourselves and a smaller community, but also we represent different institutions, and we heard different perspectives. We are full with it. We are overwhelmed. And so I would like to continue this conversation by opening it up for us, a very open conversation, a candid discussions that what we heard is kind of should be more reflective, that where do we go from here? What did you learn, and how can we work together, and what are the obstacles, what are the opportunities, and how can we move forward? So I'd like to open the floor for any comments and any reflections or any other ideas that you want to put forward to this forum, to this community. Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm going to start. I did not spend a lot of time. I came in for moderate session yesterday, but based on those discussions yesterday and the discussions we had this morning, I've been jotting down stuff here, and I'm kind of wondering whether or not we ought not to be thinking as far as emergency management is concerned, to begin to think about how we might decolonize the decolonization process for emergency management. I take the example of evacuation, which was discussed this morning. And invariably, I'm hearing that indigenous community want to see evacuation as a last resort. So what makes the emergency management system consider that as the solution to people who are perceived to be in danger? Is that indeed an extension of the colonization process? Yes, we're trying to protect lives at risk, but is evacuation the only way we can do it? I'm going to also posit that to effectively begin that decolonization of the decolonization process, we have to view all of this within what I call a systems approach, where we recognize that each aspect, each component of the emergency management system must be coached in a broader perspective as it relates to land management, water resource management, social inequities, etc. So that's one of my reflections here. I had something else, and I totally forgot what that was about. But it will come back. And
Yeah, we can come back. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, please, Kristen.
So just to kind of build on that, and I don't think First Nations communities are alone in not wanting to evacuate. I don't think anyone really wants to evacuate. They want to be able to stay home and protect their homes and their communities. I think it's an unfortunate reality that a lot of First Nations communities, especially in Manitoba, are in such hard impacted areas, so they get hit hard and usually hit first. And the process has been changing where really truly the First Nation is the one making the decision about evacuating or not evacuating, and then the likes of Jill and Nate and myself and the province, many other partners will, work with the First Nation and their wishes. I think though the question about why historically or traditionally emergency management, the field has always kind of wanted to go to that evacuation option so quick, so fast is, I think sometimes, and it's always event specific and location specific, but if you get a very remote and isolated community, you might only have a certain window of time where you might be able to get people out safely. And if you wait a little longer, you might lose that window. And now it's going to be very difficult to get people out. And now they might be really, truly in harm's way. So we have to find that balance of where that special time is, or we need to come up with better ideas on mitigation efforts so that, they're not as impacted. Or we also need to, and I think it's a little bit of everything. And I think another thing that we need to do is we are going to have to evacuate some communities sometimes. So maybe we need to look at what are the needs that First Nations communities want and need wherever they're being evacuated to, and can we build some type of a specific center, or make sure that the resources that they're looking for, that they're used to having at home, can be provided in an evacuated situation, even if it is only for 3 days or a week, or hopefully not longer. But
Kristen,
it's very hard.
Yeah, can I come back to you? But I'll come back to you. I want to make a comment on this. As I said previously, that you're very right, that no matter what, under climate change, we will face mega disasters in terms of intensity. If that happens, not only just indigenous communities, but all communities, cities, smaller remote communities, they're going to be impacted that way. So is there any other option than evacuation? There will be a situation, evacuation must be done to save lives. If that's the situation, the critical question that what we heard from this discussion, conversation, as well as from other forums, is that during emergency time, you cannot have that collective decision. So the arrangement for evacuation and the protocol must be done earlier during the normal period. That institutional responsibility belongs to the province, belongs to you, the federal, and also the First Nation or indigenous communities. We need to talk, sit together, develop that protocol for the emergency evacuation. If times comes, how should and where should we go? The First Nation should be equal seat in the equal chair, not as a subordinated community, not as a sort of, patron-client relationship. That has to be done during the normal period of time, that protocol. And that conversation must be done among ourselves, these stakeholders and people together. And we should be honest about it. If we're not honest about it, if there is a hidden agenda or other type of, it's not going to happen. So we need to reflect ourselves as institution, not as individual, as institution about decolonization, and start that process by setting an equal platform so their voices are equal, or even sometimes take the primacy because they are the victims. They should have the first say rather than we as the institution. In that way, I think I made my point very clear that during the emergency time, you won't have the time to develop the protocol. Who does what and where to go? It has to be done during the normal period. That dialogue, that kind of should happen before. Come back to you.
Well, you have said a lot of what I wanted to say there. The only thing I'll add or reiterate is that the evacuation decision cannot be made for indigenous communities. It must be made that is in partnership with indigenous communities. It cannot be a decision that is made for them. And it's a decision which has to be made in advance of the emergency situation.
Wait, it's my turn. I 100% agree with you. 100%. That's why Indigenous communities always are the ones to call for an emergency. Always the ones to call for an evacuation with the support of everybody else. So as Indigenous Services Canada Manager of Emergency Management here in Manitoba, First Nations will call me. Jill, this is what's happening. Okay, what do you guys want to do? What do you need from me? What do you want to do? Well, right now we're okay. 4 hours later, we're not okay anymore. This is what's happening. We need to evacuate. Your call. What do you need from us? Do you want the Red Cross? Do you want my support? Do you need support outside of what we have? All of those conversations are a partnership, but it's their decision. Always. Always. I will never say to a community, yes, you must evacuate. Unfortunately, in the colonial system that we do work in, there are people that will go in and say, you must evacuate. That happened, unfortunately, this year. But in the communities that are really, really strong, Cross Lake was our only big evacuation this year. It's massive, right? 6,000, 7,000 people had to get out, and we were grateful for Norway House for helping us out with that one and helping out, like that's their family, right? So, but it's the nation, and in Cross Lake, there's the First Nation and then the Cross Lake incorporated community. They have to work together. So it's not just First Nation, it's not just Indigenous, it's like they have to work together and tell us. That was the beauty of that First Nation putting together their emergency plan, putting it into place. It's not my plan. It's not the government's plan. It's not the province's plan. It's not anybody. It's the nation's plan. They tell us. So I don't know that happens everywhere. That's how it happens here in Manitoba. That's my role. And these guys jumped, all of them. They've been working with me forever. These guys jumped at me, and when I saw them turn around, I'm like, okay. And I appreciate you guys so much and working with all of you, because what I've been trying to do in all the calls for the last how many years is decolonizing not only the government department that I am in, and not on purpose necessarily, but all of a sudden, Christina, no, First Nations called me. No, First Nations called all of you guys. I'm like, okay, I'm doing the right thing here. Your voices all matter. All of your voices matter, because the nations themselves will tell us what they need. They know what they need. I don't know anything. I'm sitting in Winnipeg. I know that I can call Nate and say, Nate, I need this though, because this nation needs this. That's my role. I am that liaison. I am the advocate. I am never going to tell the First Nation ever what to do in a case of an emergency, because they already have their plans, like you're saying, that need to be developed, not during an emergency. My role during an emergency is to help them action that plan and maneuver when things don't work exactly like their plan is, because they may have never had to action it before. Nations last year flooded for the first time ever in their history. They didn't know how to build a sandbag thing. Well, guess what? I know people that know how to build a sandbag thing. You want some help with that? Yeah. That's my role.
Yeah.
That's the
and also in
government
terms of your question, like where to go, how to go, that's very, very important. But also where to go. We have seen many, many big mess, historical mess. 20 years in Winnipeg and died there. I mean, those kind of stories and histories there. So to avoid that, so that it doesn't happen again, that destination must be done well ahead in the planning by the Indigenous communities, not by other institutions. So let them figure it out and put it in place only in case of emergency if they decide to move, but there is a place to go to of their own choice.
Absolutely. And I just want to add that these plans, and
Sorry,
yes,
I'll
they
come
need
to
to be made well in advance for any community, right? We need to have our emergency response plans for the city of Brandon, for Norway House, for the city of Winnipeg. All communities need these plans, but we need to remain flexible and adaptable because climate change is making it so that it's not just Norway House that's being evacuated. It's Norway House, it's Fisher River, it's Cross Lake, it's look at just this last wildfire season alone. Manitoba, we were very, very lucky. If the same thing that was going on in Alberta, BC, and Northwest Territories was happening in Manitoba, much like a 1989 type of scenario. So Norway House might have made a plan and said, okay, if we ever have to evacuate, we're going to go here. But that might also be the same place that Cross Lake wants to go to, and Fisher River, and every other community. Well, it's full. So we have to remain adaptable and flexible as to you're the fifth community to evacuate. So lucky you got to stay home longer, but where you originally thought you were gonna go, unfortunately can't accept you. So you might have to come to Brandon, which I would rather come. I'm from Brandon, but I'd rather come to Brandon. But we have to, we want to have those plans. We need to have those plans done in advance, but we also have to have the understanding that what we wrote in our plan during peacetime, where everything was nice and calm, might not be the reality when the event hits. So we have to be flexible and adaptive.
Yeah, Nate, please, and then I'll come to you.
I'd like to just cover a few quick things, some things that I'm taking away from this conference because I really like it. The first one was talk about invasive species on vehicles moving into and across. That's something that I'm going to take away, and I'm going to try to incorporate that in the military's response, which might make our response slower. So we got to watch those vehicles. I get it. Another one that I'm going to probably, Jill, talk to you after, and then some of the other people, was that we get cultural awareness training in the military, but there's a big difference between reading a PowerPoint on your computer screen and listening to the stories here. So that's something that I really appreciate, and that I'll probably talk to you afterwards to organize some stuff for at least my team, if not like the people that are on Shiloh or 17, because I think that's really important. For future conferences, if it's possible or a consideration, I would like to see a more open and kid-friendly venue, because I like to see, I was going to bring my daughter here, but I didn't know what it was going to be like, but it would be, I think it's good for her to be in during this conversation. If, she's 7 years old, she's not participating, but it's something that it's like, you're having that conversation with the kids, if possible. I get it, it's not always realistic. That's good. And then I just sort of want to touch on, so the title of the conference is Preparing the Future Generations for Climate Change Related Emergencies and Disasters, Collaboration Between Science and Indigenous. It's a broad subject. It's huge. We had yesterday and today, it's really, really tough to tackle such a complex topic in such a short amount of time. So maybe if we want to do more refinement on what specifically we want to focus on, it can be a better use of our time, as well as the target audience of the conference, because we're trying to engage the future generations in how to do emergency management related to climate change. And the students that we had here were excellent, but potentially there's options to have more students, or the people who are in your emergency management graduate program. Excellent program, should have more students here, unless there's other options.
We want it, we want more.
I like it, and
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it very much. Dr. Datta, please.
Thank you. Two perspectives. We are talking about decolonization last 2 days. And decolonization, the decolonial, the process. So I was wondering, in decolonization, which perspective should be centered? That we need to understand. We all talk about the community perspective. So if we are so glad that we had a community people here. So community perspective should be here. When I was working in the pipeline leak disaster in James Smith, Cumberland House, and Little Pine, they talk about the people, they talk about during disaster, as you spoke, only during disaster. There is no zero concentration before disaster. Not only this, we always forget, people don't talk about the post-disaster because people are become so vulnerable after the disaster. What happened? So that's why that decolonization process should be continued. It's not just during the pre-disaster or during the disaster. It should be continued. Right information at the right time and ongoing consultation with the community people, with the community people in the table, decision-making table, so that they can give their input the way they feel is practicable. They can feel that, yes, we belong to this decision-making, we belong in this process. So it has to be the pre, during, and after. So it's not like only one versus others. It should be ongoing process. And I think this is the great starting point. I know many starting point. One of the others say, researcher and policymaker, they love to talk. But it's important, talk is often possible, but problem is, it doesn't go further. So we have to take this further in our research, in our whatever capacity we have.
That's a great segue into what I was just going to say quickly. That next year, we're Norway Health Creation that we're opening our grand opening for our Health Center of Excellence, a $150 million project with our new hospital in Norway Health. With this organization, I'm going to suggest that we take a few days and I invite this conference to Norway House to come up, see the people, visit 2 Mile, 8 Mile, we'll have boat tours, we welcome guests to our community, and we can have a beautiful 2 days of interaction, and that way we can kind of get out of the academic setting and go right to the source. And I think that's going to be such a great change of venue for us to actually do that. So I'm going to open that up for an invitation for you. So next year we can hopefully do that, and our community is well equipped to have 50 guests, no worries, and virtual as many as we have here today. So I just want to put that out there that I'd love to see you all in my community. It's a beautiful community, and we can see firsthand what we're talking about. So
Thank you, Gilbert. Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation.
It's in my note now. I wrote it.
the door's open. I just need to say when, and we're going to get it done.
Please, over to you.
Love it. I would love to come. Sounds great. I would just maybe offer like a little bit of a slightly different perspective, just, different perspectives are, I guess, what we're here for. Just that I think that actually being less specific would be more beneficial because I do think that in this kind of setting, the decolonization portion of it is not to create goals and to achieve, but more to actually listen to each other, especially across disciplines. I think that's where a lot of the beauty is held, is listening to what is military experience? I don't know. I have no idea. I think war. That's all I know, So it's so important for me to be like, oh, there's all this other stuff. And with the presentation about the potential about military involvement with disaster relief and stuff, I just feel, it's just listening to each other across disciplines and across cultures. And I think that's the beauty. So it's funny because my takeaway is I prefer to be a little less specific, but I think it's been cool to dig into this because it has brought out broader topics. But just in this lens of decolonizing, I would say that it's very important to be less goal-oriented. Anyway, that's some learning that I've had, but obviously different perspectives are the point.
Thank you.
And the
Thank you.
visit to Norios is part of that decolonization.
Love it.
Right? And
Yeah.
we're in the elements and have a lot of good colleagues there, so.
Tobit, please.
Maybe a question to the two of you and those that put this together. Did you achieve your objective with this event?
My
And, you know, I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, the scope is.
My short answer is that it surpassed our expectation considerably, immensely, because we couldn't expect that so many perspectives, so many communities, so many actors will come together and will have the opportunity to listen. So yeah, it surpassed our expectation because the primary goal, Tobin, was to create a platform where people can speak out comfortably. I think that comfort zone was here. We felt that very strong because that's the main problem, that we don't feel comfortable. That's why we brought it to Brandon, and so the students can participate. They feel it's their home turf and so on, and also other communities. So that was our intention, and it surpassed at least our expectation. I don't know about what the audience feel, but yeah, there are, obviously we cannot capture everything in one single meeting, like about specificity. Someone wanted that I wanted look for this climate specific, this science part, this Indigenous perspective part. Yeah, it wasn't there. That was not meant to be. It's rather to listen to different perspectives about certain issues. And we started with Professor Burkis's, big picture in a lot of concept, and that fired up everyone. And we continued, I think, with quite interesting, productive, useful discussion that will allow us to keep going and continuing, keeping in touch and working together.
Yeah. So when did we start all this? About 3 months ago, or a little longer than that?
A little longer.
So we've been emailing throughout the day, over the weekend, back and forth, and quick reply. And as you can imagine, like now, today, how so I'm really honored, appreciated that how hard to bring people asking. Well, it's we can only do is the asking people to come. Can you come? Can you present? And people coming from outside Brandon, inside Brandon, too close, too far, all the excuses you can make. And Friday and Saturday, who would like to come to workshop? And the winter started so fast and so cold, and so I just really I was like really overwhelmed that wow, people came. Actually, like, they can just say yes, and then in some cases they don't show up. That happens all the time. But then you're here, so that's really I think wonderful. And it's not really the kind of opportunity that we can sit together and share from so many different kind of background and history that you have. So I think that's a wonderful success in my opinion. And I think really that met the goal or more than that. Yeah.
I'd like to add to her that we didn't have any specific agenda. We had no agenda. We just wanted to create a platform so that we get different perspectives. Our title is Two Eye, but I mentioned that multiple eyes. That's what we believe in, and that's what we wanted to. And so we didn't have any specific agenda. So we got a lot more than what we expected.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, please. Jody.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, one of the main things that's kind of come up is the fact that there's, I guess, a lot of government policy that's pretty archaic, and that's going to take like a really long time to fix. And I think what we see here is building these individual relationships at a level that we have, and it sort of starts to create that critical mass. of all of us working together and we're on the same page. And like Julia mentioned, she's really internal, working with the First Nations right on the ground. And I think that's what it's going to take when we're moving forward, and just the importance of that, and not undervaluing that.
Thank you, Judy. I just want to continue what you are saying, that say this kind of policy that evolved over hundreds of years by the colonial state, and who's going to change? Is it going to happen in Ottawa, or in a democratic society, in a pluralistic society? It happens when people talk in different places, that narratives need to develop at the local level, regional level. Then when everybody talks, then the narrative goes to the policymakers' ears, and then that comes down to here. So the importance of when we are talking about, we don't make decisions. I mean, all the ministers, cabinet, and so on and so. So how does this conversation relate to that? Because all of us, our narratives get changed, and students reflected very, very well. I got changed. I got something that I haven't thought about it. All this thinking and narrative, that the conversation, from us, it gets transmitted, and then it affects the policy, and then it comes back to change that colonized state policy. That's the way it functions. So what you're saying is so right, that our thinking and then our acting get changed consciously or subconsciously, or even other ways. But this narrative is very important. So what we are talking and engaging and so on, this is so critical, and we are so grateful for you to make the sacrifice and come over here, driving thousands of miles and kilometers from Ottawa, from Calgary, from Saskatoon and so on, and Manitoba, different distant locations. So we are very, very grateful. We couldn't believe it that, this is spontaneous kind of, participation will happen. And we are here in 1.5 days. So this narrative is very, very important. We don't see it that way, Jody, but it's narrative because it changes our thinking and it affects higher level. We are not policy makers directly, but what we are thinking and acting matters because it affects them. And we create, when this kind of thinking and so on, it makes changes. And it's a slow process. It's a process. Many people talked about it, Gilbert Baker and other. It's a process, and Professor Belfort Spencer mentioned very distinctly that it's a process oriented. It's not a magic bullet that will change these things. Decolonization is basically a process, and we are changing the colonial states, its role and behavior, its practice. So it's not going to happen overnight. But how do we make change? One student asked a question that how do I make the changes? I want to respond to her that you change start personally. That means what really, greenhouse gas emission and so on, I can personally change my behavior, rather than, driving for my car. For individual driving, you can take a pool or you can take a public transportation. I'm talking about that kind of thing, that personal level. But then our thinking will not get transmitted unless we empower ourselves. So how do we empower? The empowering, basically, individually, we cannot speak very loudly. Even I scream in the street and so on. The Swedish girl made a difference when she sat in front of the school that got the global attention, but not many of us can do it and will have that kind of global impact. So how can we do that then? The best strategy, in my limited knowledge, is the best thing that the group, association, club that aligns with your thinking. Because those kind of voices, they are the spokesperson or platform. You can engage yourself and make contribution to that. And they can influence, because these clubs, association, different groups, that's the way our society functions. Because then we can influence the policymakers, the senior bureaucrats, and also the politicians and political institutions. But if I go and talk to an MP and so, it doesn't go anywhere. But if I go with an institution and organization, they listen to those organizations. Yes, to you, please.
Sorry, you're bringing this up, so I feel like I should do a little plug for a group that I volunteer with, Sustainable Branding. It seems like some people might want to join who are here. We work with this stuff and talk with this stuff and do sustainability projects here in Brandon. So I feel like I would be remiss in you saying that, for me not to mention
Here you go.
sustainable
Yeah.
Brandon.
Right on, you
Yeah.
know, exactly. So that's how you make changes, because there is a spokesperson for you. What you're thinking and your group is thinking will be reflected. They can influence, different points of decision making. So that's the way I would think. And I wanted to ask the students, overall, what you heard last 1.5 day, are you optimistic or pessimistic? What is your feel? What do you feel? I mean, about your future or our planet's future. What do you feel?
There's no wrong answers.
No wrong answers. No. What do you feel? I mean, optimistic or pessimistic?
I can speak on that. I definitely feel optimistic. I've been here this morning, but I've almost written 2 more pages of notes. So I'm really excited to take what I've learned from here and apply it in my real life, in the future, and just to learn more. Something that I was saying to Tobin over the break actually is that emergency management is continuous learning. And I'm really grateful to be here today for the learning that I did. Just excited.
Thank you. Thank you.
What about you?
Like I said, when I was growing up, we called it global warming, which was not a great title for it and concept for it. But I went to a workshop on climate change at 14 and 30. They leave you feeling like, oh my God, we're all gonna die. That's the feeling I got from those workshops. So they did just talk about, this is what's happening, this is what's going to happen, and that was it. This one though, it felt like we are a group of people, we are working towards something. I see the youth are getting more involved. When I joined the ADIS program, I didn't know it was a thing. I joined it because I did movies, fiction or facts. That's how I got into the ADIS program. I watched disaster movies. And so this one's a lot more inspirational. And it's like, and everyone is engaged in talking. And when I went to those conferences, we were being talked at. And so yeah, this one's a lot more positive.
Oh, that's
There's
good
a
to
bit more
know.
hope.
Yeah.
Because I'm also in the rural development program and we're doing sustainability right now.
Right. Okay.
And the questions from the younger one, that again about 22, 24 is there a point? What's the point right now before this the world just doesn't seem like it's going to work, right? So.
Yeah. Well, I think the asking questions it's always important, right? And I get to know Gilbert well, and he taught me a lot about his community and his history of journey to who he is, and so then simply the emergency management we call the 4 phases and 4 pillars of emergency management start with the preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation, and that's how I teach. Like I can just talk about it without reading anything. So then now I question, is it really the right approach? Is it something working for people? And then hearing about even the relocation, evacuation process, we talk about that. Is it the right approach? So we need to really question and then try to do the best we can. But the big question for me is maybe recovery would be the first kind of place to start, because we've all experienced some level of disasters, especially indigenous communities. They have history of devastation and devastation and devastation and devastation, right? So they need a recovery moment. I don't know if the word recovery by itself is the right word to say. Maybe there is some other word we have to use. And so I've been thinking about recovery, healing, all that, like mourning. There are some kind of process that the communities or individuals need to go through. And I don't know if there's any time that they can overcome or if they can really recover. Maybe they can, right? So it's an ongoing process that has to be recognized. And that's probably one way that we all start from. And then the next thing is maybe we can try to prepare for it if something will happen again. And then it's a kind of a continuation of the coping kind of a process that we don't really have an end and start and end. And the 4 phases we've been using, I'm starting to doubt if that is a good idea or not. But I don't have any answer to that. But I'm just asking questions, right? You have to start asking, is it working, right?
Any other burning comments, reflections? If not, then over to you, then I will wrap up. So please go ahead with your closing comments.
Sam.
Yes, Shakib, please.
Yeah, so, sorry. So within this 1.5 day workshop, we learned a lot about the Indigenous decolonization, about resources and disasters. So one comment regarding the youth is that, okay, I'm optimistic about it, that we are moving towards a path, but there is no such path which we can say that it's absolutely correct. There are more perspective involved and more and more. So what we need is much more a collaborative approach. Like, think about it, like indigenous knowledge is much more important for disaster resilience because these people have been living here for hundreds, thousands of years. They know the geography, they know everything. So taking the knowledge from them could help us in the current situation for preparedness. They know how to communicate. Like if we talk about the early age communication, what they use is smoke. With smoke they signal. Or what we use is like mirrors to signal the other things. It was in the British era though. But we use those. So these are the communication mediums. So this can inspire some of the recent innovations or technologies or adaptations which can actually help us for a better future. And if we talk about our ancestors, what they use bags where they carry water. Now we are saying, carry a bottle. You will reduce your carbon emission. They did it before. They were the one who did it before. So taking inspiration from there and going towards an innovation would actually make us much more resilient. And we should move, as Professor Etsuko mentioned, that we should start from the recovery. Yes, because you can make a resilience residence, house, anything, but you don't know when that catastrophe will happen and what could be the probable outcome. We don't know it. So from that phase, we have to take lesson from it, learn from it, and go to the recovery phase rather than, I would say, build back better. Currently, what we have, we can build it better, or we can build back better. That's how we will become resilient. And also, we have to take our indigenous knowledge in account. Yes, I know it's a whole system currently running on the colonization system, but it's slowly moving towards another place. Slowly moving towards much more like mixed approach. And that's why I'm particularly optimistic about it, that we are going to have a huge good comeback with climate change and also with our resilience in terms of disasters. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakib. Thank you very, very much indeed for capturing all the perspectives. This is over to the
Okay, well, it's a little bit very noisier. I'll just stand up. Well, thank you so much again for coming here, and I really appreciate you being here. Now I can sleep tonight. Well, so we had such a wonderful conversation, dialogue, and I hope you can take away and then just kind of sit down and think about it. And then let us know. And I think this project is carry on. So keep in touch with the Dr. Hack, and then more to come. And Norway House next year, huh? Right?
Why not?
I'm very excited. And maybe, so the Norway House next year, and then maybe for something young people, organizing by young people, for young people, to young people, doing something, maybe Norway House or for pre-Norway House event. What do you think? Maybe?
Well, we got a lot of things. We got youth groups up there.
Yeah.
We have multiplex. We have boat rides. This beautiful lakes around there, considering everything I said. But it's definitely gonna be a beautiful, I'm not suggesting this time of year. I'm hoping maybe at the end of summer or somewhere in between, so it'd be a very pleasant trip for everybody and a few days of, good pickerel dinners and some, some leadership involvement and some youth as well, who can mix with the youth that are coming. And that would be maybe another kind of workshop half a day for them, the indigenous youth and the youth of the academic sectors who want to come. So there's a lot of possibilities, but I'm not planning. Unless yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it, and I think we'll talk more. And anyway, well, thank you so much.
Just to wrap up today, on behalf of the University of Manitoba and also from the organizing committee, I would like to express my personal, gratitude and thanks to all of you for your commitment and personal sacrifice to come to this workshop. I really mean it. Rather than trying to synthesize, because you have all heard of it, and that's a tough job, I would like to be a little bit of reflective and share with you so that you can take some thoughts with you, take home. One of the things that we have been debating and dealing with and grappling with is the issue of integrating, collaborating, or working together between indigenous, traditional, local, whatever you call it, this indigenous knowledge with science or scientific knowledge. Why it's a big deal, big issue? The issue in the disaster context and in the climate change related disaster context. So to simplify, climate change is natural, it's happening, and it will happen. But what we are talking about, could you please bring these things 10 minutes later, please? Okay, thank you. So climate change, we are talking about, it's a natural process. Climate change, global warming is a natural process. It will happen. But what we are talking about is the pace that we are putting atmosphere on a steroid, that's human-induced greenhouse gas emission from our consumer behavior, our industrial machine, all the machinery, that consumption. So that's the root of it, that we are putting it in a steroid. It's moving faster than natural discourse. And it is creating the events that are very, very extreme. We have never seen it, never experienced it. So we're in that unknown territory. It happened in British Columbia, 2022. Fiona, it happened in the East Coast. It could happen in Manitoba this year, next year. So when that happens, this type of events and so on, and we are not prepared for it, we feel helpless. So how to deal with it? So we have established institutions based on science that we learned in more than 200, 300 years' time. European universities, technical colleges, all of those things, North American college over the last 300, 400 years taught us in universities with science and so on how to deal with it, with these things, how to respond and so on. But it does the job, but it also fails in a big way. It fails in a big way. Number one is that we did not consider secondary, tertiary, and other effects. We heard about Manitoba Hydro's mess. It created electricity, gave power to Manitobans, helped Manitoba's economic development, so on, but making mess at the cost of First Nation communities, indigenous communities of the North. So we benefited through those colonized processes, but generations of the original people, First Nations, they take the price. Is it desirable by society? It's not. But we didn't realize at that time, that was the paradigm. That was the agenda, and state, in a colonized way, knowingly or unknowingly, imposed that on different vulnerable generations. So climate change, what I heard from everyone last 1.5 day, especially with the First Nation communities, that climate change cannot be viewed from a lens of climate change per se. It relates to other bigger, broader issues. Land management, water management, atmosphere management. Those are part of day-to-day life, but also longer life. So disconnect of climate change, I think, is a major problem of science and our scientific practices and mindset. I'm not against systematic science. I do myself also a lot of scientific work, and my team does as well. So we are not dismissing science, but what we are trying to say that science is not enough itself. We need to bring other knowledge. We need to bring other experience. We need to bring other wisdom from elderly, from women, from other vulnerable people. That hasn't happened in the past, but now these things are shifting at different institutional level, at the academic level, at the academic level, at the governmental policy level, because it's opening up. There are new generations of bureaucrats they are taking over. It's a new thinking. They're lot more open. Because the previous generation, we screwed up with all these big mess, with a very closed mindset because of the belief in science and different colonized paradigm of the role of the state. But the new generations are a lot more open. They understand that what we heard in last 1.5 days, that holistic approach. Holistic approach does not mean generalized, a sort of overseeing, losing the detail, because the details comes from the stories we heard. I want to point out that in science, for example, we have some really methods, contradiction methods. I'll give you an example. We heard a lot of stories from many people, but as a scientist, I heard from my colleagues and so on, what do I get out of these stories? I don't get it. They're very honest about it. That what brings in it? They don't get it. And the others, when I talk to my colleagues and others from First Nation communities and so, and they see the numbers and quantitative and all those equations, so, they also the same thing that I don't get it, all these numbers and so on. How does it relate to my life or our lives? You see the contradiction? There's a huge tension. They don't go together. They don't match. But I want to share with you that I worked with our team and recently published. It's coming from Bangladesh coast, fishermen. So fishermen, by looking at the water color and cloud, they predict that today there will be a storm. And they say there will be no storm by looking at the color in the ocean. So we read it, we saw it here and there. And it's fake. I mean, the color, they just make it up, There's no basis. I mean, how could they predict based on by looking at color? So we got grappled with it, we got puzzled. Oh, yeah, it doesn't have much basis. I did a lot of review of indigenous knowledge, those things. Then one scholar, he's an oceanographer. Unfortunately, he was in the 50s and passed away, a brilliant scholar. I talked to him and he said that when ocean surface get warmer up beyond certain degrees, then planktons, they move up, come to the very surface, and they get concentrated so much that water gets darker, looks blank, revealing the water temperature basically. and they can immediately say that it's time to go home because big storm is coming. Because the ocean surface temperature up to 50 meter, if it is above 26 degrees Celsius, there will be a low pressure and a storm, a cyclone. That's scientific, but they're predicting and so on, and we published it recently in one of the journals, Ecology and Society. So you see that indigenous knowledge, the observations, the time-tested thing has a basis. We don't know, we did not explore enough. But there is science behind it, there's observations, but it's not explained in scientific way the way we are used to. So that's why we can make the bridges. That's my main point. There are rooms for bridges. We are not yet there, but we need to explore. We need to understand and respect what's in there, what our elderly, our knowledge keep are telling. We don't get it, but we should get it. And that's why we need to listen and think and dig more into it and find out the value of it for our purpose and vice versa. We can also bring science in a more simpler way with much more better, more effective communication. We need to do a lot of work. You mentioned, Gilbert, yesterday about communication and so on. So, simplifying these things. So I think that's what we can do. And our younger generation, I think, also can help us in taking up those challenges. These are big challenges ahead of us. I think if we can work together, collaboratively, respectfully, I think then we can get there. I'll just finally wrap up with one thing, that whether I heard about optimism and pessimism. When I read about climate change and others and global process and so on, I cannot be optimistic. Why? Because Canada was a Kyoto signatory. The new government came in and scrapped the whole Kyoto Protocol. We are signatory of Paris Agreement. And we are saying that we will reach 250, zero emission sort of country. And then we are saying on the other hand that, yeah, we are trying, but we'll not get there. So with those kind of policy implementation, we cannot be very, very hopeful and optimistic. But I'm very optimistic with the fact that the climate change that I talked about, that's human-induced part, who created it? It's not coming from outside, it's we. We are responsible. So, and we created it. So we are in the driver's seat. So if we change our behavior, our thinking, our practice, we can be there, we can reduce it. It's in our control because it's our mess. So we can fix it, we can optimistic, we can make a better future for not only for us, for the future generations. We believe in it and we should believe in ourselves. And we need to work together and go forward with it. You have a very nice, safe trip to home. And I thank all of you and I thank all the volunteers from Brandon University and also from University of Manitoba and from other places, from Calgary. And you have a very nice and safe home. And thank you very, very much. And we'll keep in touch. Thank you. And have the lunch.